Welcome to the Buddhism Seeds channel. This is where we listen together to ancient Zen stories, gently guiding the soul back to stillness, and from there into a deep, peaceful sleep. Each story is not just a tale, but a mirror that illuminates the heart so we can see more clearly the love, forgiveness, and transformative power in every moment of life. In life, everyone carries wounds to some extent, born of words, actions, or even misunderstandings. We can hold on to them like a heavy stone in the heart, or we can learn to set them down through compassion and forgiveness. When we understand that forgiveness is not weakness, but the greatest strength of a loving heart, then we can truly be free. Forgiveness does not only release the other person. First and foremost, it frees us from the chains of hatred and suffering. It is like a flame. If we keep holding it in our palm, we are the first to be burned. Today's story will lead you onto that path, a path where compassion becomes a cool stream. Washing away resentment and forgiveness becomes the doorway to peace. Listen slowly, relax your mind, and let each word become the rhythm that carries you into sleep, where the heart is nourished by the seeds of understanding and love. And now I invite you to enter the first Zen story, The Monk and the Hungry Tiger. In the distant past, when the Blessed One's light still shone across the fields of the Ganges, there was a small monastery nestled along the slopes of Mount Satara. The mountain was not as sky-piercing as the Himalayas, nor as imposing as the Vindhya range, yet it held a gentle contemplative beauty. Each morning, clouds draped it like a thin ribbon. A brook whispered along the rock face, and the sound of temple bells resounded throughout the valley. In that monastery lived a young ascetic named Samita. People often said Samita's eyes shone like an oil lamp in the night, and his smile alone could ease the hearts of those in suffering. Nurtured in the Dharma from the age of 15, he chose a simple life. One alms bowl, a worn yellow robe, and bare feet, familiar with every stone along the mountain path. Samita often rose very early. Before dawn broke, he would sit upright beneath the ancient sala tree, breathing slowly, his gaze deep and quiet. The villagers below in the valley called him the one who brings the dawn before the sun, because whenever Samita descended the mountain for alms, people felt that the new day began not only with light, but with the serene presence of a sage. But the story does not begin in the peaceful valley. It begins in the deep forest, where darkness thickens and fear is always lurking. One afternoon, as the sun tilted westward, Samita left the monastery carrying an empty alms bowl. He intended to go deeper into the forest to meditate alone for many days, as ascetics often did to test the heart. The path into the forest was dim. Interlaced canopies shut out the light. Bird songs faded away, replaced by wind and the crunch of dry leaves underfoot. Samita walked slowly, contemplating as he went. This body is fragile, like foam on water. Life and death, fullness and hunger, fear and peace are but waves that rise on the lake's surface. If the mind does not waver, those waves become transparent. When night fell, he built a small hut of leaves. A thin crescent moon hung overhead, its silver light spread across the ground. The silence was so deep, he could hear the faint rustle of tiny insects. Samita sat still, eyes closed, body and mind released. Yet deep in that forest, another creature was enduring a terrible hunger. A tigress gaunt to the bone. Her 3 young cubs had not suckled in days. She tried to hunt, but her strength was spent. She staggered, eyes bloodshot, breath heaving. In the dark, she caught the scent of human flesh, the warm body of a meditating ascetic. A growl rumbled in her throat. Instinct urged her to lunge, but her legs were heavy, chained by exhaustion. Only one urge filled her mind. I must eat at any cost. Otherwise, my cubs and I will die. That night, Samita heard a strange sound, dry leaves crushed underfoot, harsh breathing, and the low rumble of a wild beast. He opened his eyes. In the pale moonlight, the tigress's blazing eyes appeared. She stood only a few steps away. Samita did not panic. He looked straight into the animal's eyes, as if looking into his own fear. "You are hungry, aren't you?" Samita said softly, his voice steady. The tigress gave a low growl, not to threaten, but in acknowledgement. Samita pressed his palms together. "I, too, have been hungry. Not only in the belly, but hungry for love, hungry for understanding. But I learned that only compassion can feed us all. You want to eat my flesh, but let me listen to you first." The tiger did not understand human words, but she stopped. Something flickered in her eyes, caught between instinct and something else. The next day, the tale of the monk who met a hungry tiger began to spread from woodcutters passing through the forest. They saw tiger tracks around Samita's hut, but strangely there was no blood and no body. They wondered, how did he survive? Maybe the tiger feared spiritual light, or perhaps compassion itself kept her from killing. The rumors quickly reached the village and then the monastery, but the truth was known only to Samita and the tigress, and that truth would be told through breaths, glances, and the strange dialogues between a monk and a beast on the brink of starvation. At dawn, dew gathered on the grass like cold jewels. Samita opened his eyes, still seated beneath the simple leafy roof. The forest remained drowsy, but within him it was clear as a lake without ripples. In front of the hut, tiger tracks were pressed thick into the earth. He joined his palms, silently grateful for a night that had passed in peace, though death had been only a few breaths away. A faint sound. From the thicket, the tigress appeared. She was so thin that her shoulder blades jutted like knobs of stone. Patches of fur had fallen away. Her amber eyes were cracked with dryness. Samita looked straight into her eyes. No challenge, no avoidance, only an equal gaze between two beings, each bearing their own suffering. "You've come again," he said slowly, speaking as he breathed. The tigress did not roar. She stood 5 paces away, head lowered, as if listening to a sound only she could hear. Samita quietly lifted his water gourd, extended his hand, then stopped at a safe distance. After a moment, the tigress stepped closer and sniffed for a long time. She did not drink, but warm breath steamed against the gourd. Then she retreated, her eyes still fixed on that calm face. "I have no meat," Samita said, his voice sad, but not sorrowful. "I also don't have a simple answer to your hunger, but I have this. I will remain here, no running away, no resisting, and no feeding hatred." He set the gourd down and gently pushed it forward. The tigress stepped a half pace and stopped again. Hunger made her tremble, but something in the man's presence made her hesitate. Instinct urged her to pounce. Another instinct, unnamed, held her back. By noon, the sun drew the mist up like a thin veil. From the forest path came a woodcutter, carrying a bundle of sticks. His name was Pavana. He froze at the sight of the tiger, and the wood fell with a clatter. "Dear heavens!" A tiger, Pavana whispered, eyes wide. His hand went for his machete. Samita raised a hand as if signaling a child. "Don't shout. Don't run. Don't draw your blade," he said quietly, evenly. "She is hungry, very hungry, but she is learning not to let hunger rule her." Master, what are you saying? How can a tiger learn Pavana?" trembled. "She took Lawa's goat and old Danta's calf. My wife and children live down there. If she goes down, I know," Samita nodded. "But if we cut her down, her cubs will still starve. A spear will only make this forest cry louder. Give me time, Pavana. Give me 2 days. Don't spread the alarm yet." Pavana looked at the tiger, then at Samita, and swallowed hard. 2 days, he murmured. "And if you're hurt, when I entered the forest, I accepted all consequences. But if we act out of fear, death will not stop. Trust me once more." Pavana hesitated, then picked up his wood and backed away. Before leaving, he looked at the tiger and spoke as if to himself. "Please don't harm him. Please." The brown robe disappeared among the reeds. The tigress remained still, like a statue cast from the struggle against instinct. Samita let out a long breath. He remembered the words of his old teacher, Elder Vachira. Compassion is not a soft emotion. It is the discipline of the heart. It asks us to be firm as stone and gentle as water. Evening came. The wind shifted, carrying a metallic scent. Samita rose and followed it. Across a gravel bed, he found a mountain goat lying dead by the stream, perhaps caught in a hunter's trap or fallen from a cliff. The flesh had not yet rotted. Only a few insects clustered at the wound. Samita regarded the animal for a long time. He understood that for a carnivore, fruit could not soothe the hunger burning through every muscle. He bowed before the carcass. "I ask to borrow your body to save another life, and to save the little ones waiting for milk." He used a branch as a lever and dragged the goat toward the hut. The tigress waited from afar. When the blood scent neared her eyes narrowed and her body shook. Samita laid the carcass down, stepped back 3 paces, squatted, and kept his gaze on the tiger. "Eat," he said. The tigress still did not move. Her forepaws dug into the earth. She looked at the man, then the prey, then back again. Slowly she stepped forward, each step a secret negotiation between instinct and a tender new trust. First she licked around the wound, then her teeth sank in. A very low growl escaped, not a threat, but the unlatching of hunger, long held at bay. She ate. She ate in silence. She ate as if she had to ask permission. Samita did not look away. Each time she raised her head, he nodded slightly in return. When the chewing slowed, he spoke. "You have cubs, don't you?" The tigress paused. A flash crossed her eyes like lightning. Then she tore off a chunk of meat, clamped it in her jaws, and backed into the shadows, toward a low, grassy den. Dusk fell, and the forest glittered with fireflies. Samita followed the tracks at a respectful distance. At the den, he heard faint cries, 3 gray-furred cubs, bellies, hollow eyes, not yet fully open. Hunger rasped from them in hoarse, drawn-out whimpers. The mother set the meat down. Tiny mouths latched on, smacking desperately. Samita felt his throat tighten. He pressed his palms together and whispered, "May you grow strong." The mother turned and looked at him. That gaze was no longer a torch of threat, but something like wary gratitude. She did not roar. She only breathed hard, as if to say, "Close enough." Samita stepped back, sat on a rock, and lit a small fire. He did not cook. He only warmed his hands, letting the heat seep into his skin. In the blaze, he heard wind leaves and the soft smacking of life being pulled back from the edge. He understood this was not only a tiger and a monk. It was a negotiation between fear and compassion, between instinct and mindfulness, between inevitable death and the will to preserve life in the least painful way. Day 2. The rumor had crossed the forest's edge. In the village of Viluna, people gathered at the morning market murmuring. Danta, the man who had lost a calf, was flushed with anger. We can't wait. A tiger that eats a calf today will eat children tomorrow. We must gather the men and take our spears at once. An old woman replied. But they say monk Samita made it leave. Leave, Danta snapped. It will return. Its teeth don't know what dharma is. Pavana stepped in. I saw it with my own eyes. The tiger stood before him and didn't attack. He asked for 2 days. 2 days for it to fill its belly and gain strength to kill. More. Danta growled. From behind Elder Vachira appeared an old man with a silver beard and eyes like a deep lake. Danta, he said, warm and slow. Fear makes us raise our voices, but raising our voices doesn't make fear smaller. If spears solved everything, this forest would have been silent long ago. Let me go up the mountain. Danta bit his lip. The villagers looked at one another. Finally, he threw down his spear and waved his hand. 3 days. I give 3 days. If anyone is harmed, I'll lead the hunt myself. On the mountain, Samita heard familiar footsteps. He turned and bowed. Revered elder. I hear you borrowed a mountain goat's body to save a mother tiger. Vachira said, a sad smile at his eyes. You are walking a thin rope. I know, Samita replied, but there's an even thinner rope between compassion and naivete. I'm trying to let mindfulness be the pole that keeps the balance. Vachira sat by the fire and looked toward the dark hollow where the cubs whimpered. What do you plan to do next? I want to move them away from the settled areas toward the Kanhari rocks, where few people graze their herds. But before moving them, they must be strong enough. And the men of Viluna, the elder asked. They are afraid, Samita said quietly. Fear demands certainty. Fear makes people love the spear. Vachira was silent for a long while. Then he said, I'll go down to the village and speak with them. You stay, but don't let compassion turn into clinging to results. Remember, compassion is not, I must save them. Compassion is, I do all I can with my heart. The rest is conditions and causes. Samita bowed to the ground. I receive your teaching. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Ketu, a notorious poacher in the region, crept along the forest's edge. He had set an iron trap on the rocky slope the week before, hoping to catch a leopard. Seeing tiger tracks, his eyes gleamed. A tiger pelt will fetch a lot of silver, he thought. Death smelled like money. As he neared the den, Ketu crouched and raised his bow. He saw the tigress's thin back as she licked her cubs. The arrow hissed through the air, then stopped mid-flight. A hand had caught it at the shaft. Lower the bow. Samita's voice rang out, not loud but firm. Startled, Ketu staggered back. You. Who are you to interfere with my livelihood? I am the one that if you shoot, you will be shooting at your own fear. Samita said, eyes still calm. Your trap doesn't only clamp the animal's leg, it clamps the human heart. Save the preaching, Ketu growled. I hunt because I'm hungry. My children need to eat. Samita looked straight at him. So do they, he said, tilting his head toward the 3 tiger cubs. When hunger drives people to cruelty, we don't need more cruelty to treat it. We need another path. What path? Roasted tiger meat, Ketu sneered. The path of a truce, Samita said. I know old Tanu in the village has an aged cow near the end. I will ask him to donate it. In return, I'll ask the elder to rally rice for your family for 3 weeks. You remove your traps and leave this area. The tigers will be moved toward Kanhari. No one dies. Do you dare accept the better part of yourself? Ketu froze. The better part, the words echoed in his chest, like a bell lost among river stones. He smirked. And if Tanu refuses, I will look him in the eye as I'm looking at you, Samita said. And if he still refuses, I will go to another house. I will knock until the human heart opens. And you, can you open yours? Ketu looked at the arrow in Samita's hand. It lay there, a piece of evidence of a death that had nearly happened. He lowered the bow. Sweat ran along his temple. 3 weeks, he rasped. And I leave this area. Samita nodded. 3 weeks. Ketu turned and walked away, his shoulders heavy, as if he had just set down an invisible boulder. The second night. Samita sat by the fire telling a story, in an even tone, like a lullaby. Long ago, someone kept a lamp lit in a storm. They could not stop the wind, nor move the clouds. They only knew to shield the flame with their 2 hands. In the morning, the villagers followed that light and did not fall into the lake. The tigress raised her head to listen, not understanding the language but understanding the breath. He told her not to make her human, but so that he himself would not become a beast. The beast of fear, the beast of the obsession to succeed. Each sentence was a thin sheet slipped under a trembling porcelain vase trust. At dawn, he went down to the village to see Tanu. The gaunt old man sat on the porch, looking at the cow, emaciated and spent. This cow belonged to my father, he said. It has turned the millstone for many seasons. I know. Samita pressed his palms together. And it is near its last breath. Please let me have it as its final field of merit. So it can save 3 small lives and save more human lives from being shoved into blood by hatred. Tanu looked deep into Samita's eyes, then gave a sad smile. I remember my father once donated a water buffalo when the flood came. He said, if we don't give, the river is only standing water. All right, I'll give it. But I want to see the ending with my own eyes. Samita bowed, eyes moist. I promise you will see that no blood is shed in vain. News of the donated cow spread quickly. Some opposed, some nodded. Elder Vachira walked the market speaking to small groups. Pavana gathered rice. Danta stood silently at the forest's edge, his hand on the spear's shaft, but he did not lift it. When the cow was led up the slope, the tigress was waiting at a distance. She did not lunge. She circled, sniffed the wind, then stopped at a measured space from Samita. He knew this was the exam hour of a fragile trust. He patted the cow's neck lightly and whispered, "Thank you. Go in peace." Then he stepped back. The tigress approached, not pouncing, pressing her nose to the cow's side. The cow did not run. It stood like an old milestone that no longer feared the storm. 1 beat, 2 beats. The tigress bit the neck, decisive, but not cruel. She did it as if performing a sad rite. Blood welled bright red on green grass. Samita pressed his palms together, not looking away. He looked straight at the truth. 1 life passes so that many others continue. In that moment, he heard each beat of his own heart and the murmur of the forest in agreement. Let there be less pain. The cubs ate their fill. For the first time, they made small, contented growls. The tigress licked each one patient, as a prayer spoken with the tongue. As the sun leaned low, Samita spread his worn robe on the ground and drew a simple map with a stick from the current den along the stream over the white stone flats into the Kanhari Valley. He pointed at the route and looked at the tigress. Tomorrow, I will lead. There are fewer people there. There the wind carries less scent of goats. The tigress lifted her head. A silent pause between two species. Then she turned back into the den and lay over her cubs. The third night. Small fires dotted the village like fallen stars. Elder Vachira stood on Danta's porch. They talked for a long time. At times Danta raised his voice. At times he wept. In the end he set his spear against the pillar and no longer touched it. 3 days, he said hoarsely. If a child is hurt tomorrow morning we will go up the mountain together. Vachira replied to witness a quiet relocation. The next morning, Samita walked ahead, holding a reed stalk as a staff. The tigress followed her 3 cubs, stumbling over chips of stone now and then. Pavana trailed at a distance, his eyes and ears ready to report back to the village if anything happened. Along the way, a few black birds flew overhead, calling with clacks, like stone striking stone. At the white stone flats, a narrow slope appeared, just wide enough for the body of a tiger to pass. Above it loomed a large boulder. A light push would be enough. Samita suddenly stopped. He heard it, the held breath, the feet trying to hide. From the brush's edge, Ketu appeared, but without his bow. He raised both hands. I came to clear the traps I set, he said. I forgot one. As he bent to loosen it, a stone drag rope jerked unexpectedly. The big boulder above began to roll. A rattling roar shook the slope. Pavana shouted, "Look out!" The boulder thundered down, aimed straight at the tigress. In a fraction of a breath, Samita lunged, arms spread. He could not stop the rock, but he could shove the tigress aside, if only by half a handspan. He pushed. The boulder skimmed past, blasting white dust, skidding and crashing over the rim with a booming thud that sent sound waves through the valley. The tigress froze. The 3 cubs trembled. Ketu dropped to his knees, face blanched. I thought I had removed them all. Samita's breath came in bursts. His arm bled where the rock had scraped it. He pressed a hand to his chest and felt the heart bloom with pain. Then he looked at Ketu. You no longer have arrows, but the old traps still have teeth. Ketu struck his forehead against the stone. I beg. I truly beg. Don't beg me. Samita exhaled. Beg the fear within you to let go. He turned to the tigress and extended his uninjured hand, not touching, only offering palm open. The tigress stepped forward and gave a very soft huff, like an answer. Then she lowered her head and gently butted his sleeve with her brow, a gesture so strange that Pavana had to wipe his eyes. Let's go. Samita said, his voice steady again. Kanhari is waiting. By day's end, the small party reached the edge of the Kanhari Valley. Tall honey-gold grasses, clumps of brush for cover, a stream threading between 2 mounds like a silver stitch. Samita stopped and pointed to a dry, rocky hollow. Here. The tigress set her cubs down, then turned and looked at Samita for a long time. In that gaze was much caution, gratitude, and the acknowledgement of a thin boundary, newly drawn. Henceforth, each side would have its place. Starting tomorrow, I won't come as close as before, Samita said. I want you to hunt on your own. If hunger is too great, follow the stream. I'll leave a few scraps, but only for a time. Then we say goodbye. The tigress lowered her head. For the first time, she let out a deep, warm growl, not from her teeth, but from her heart. Samita smiled. I hear you. He turned away. Up the slope, Pavana was waiting. He gripped Samita's hand. You did what no one believed possible. I didn't do it. I only tried not to ruin it, Samita answered with a gentle smile. They walked down together. Behind them, the tigers faded into the gold grass like a strip of sunlight going out. That afternoon in the village of Viluna, people gathered in the temple yard. Tanu sat in the front row, eyes glistening. Danta stood with folded arms, looked at Samita for a long time, then gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Elder Vachira spoke briefly. Today we did not defeat a tiger. We defeated a portion of aggression in each of us. The applause was not loud but steady, like vine rain on a thatched roof. Samita looked around, filled with gratitude. He suddenly saw Ketu standing behind a pillar, wearing a torn hat, his hands no longer shaking. Ketu bowed his head very low, then quietly left away from the forest. Night fell, and the sky opened with stars thick as scattered salt. Samita sat on the porch, fingering his beads, listening to the distant stream. He closed his eyes. In the dark behind his eyelids, he saw three things, clearly the tigress's face as she ate the cow, like a sorrowful rite, the boulder's plunge as a lesson in carelessness, and the human gaze, which when illuminated by compassion, can soften like earth after rain. He knew the story was not over. Forgiveness is not born from a single deed. It grows through uncomfortable tests, when misunderstood, when attacked, when goodness is dragged into doubt. And there is this as well: the tigers have been moved, but the boundary between forest and village remains fragile. One bow at the wrong time, one panicked shout, and everything could collapse. Samita opened his eyes. On the hillside, Danta's lantern still burned late. He stood and walked toward it. He needed one last conversation with the man who had lost a calf, and nearly lost his faith, to mend the thin cracks that remained. The night wind carried the smell of dry straw and stream water. Above, the moon slipped from the clouds, thin as a crescent that had relinquished its sharpness and kept only its gentleness. That night, Samita went to Danta's house. The oil lamp cast the old man's shadow onto the bamboo wall. Danta sat alone, eyes reddened, his calloused hand gripping a rope still stained with the old blood of the calf taken by the tiger. When Samita stepped in, the old man looked up, his eyes like embers smoldering. You've come, Danta said hoarsely. I know everyone in the village praises you, but I still feel a cold emptiness in my chest. Samita sat across from him and pressed his palms together. Please speak. I am here to listen. I lost my last calf. It was my strength, my remaining hope. People tell me I must forgive. But how can I forgive when my children's bellies cry empty, when I hear my wife sobbing in the kitchen? Danta slammed his hand on the table, eyes brimming. You say compassion can sustain us, but can compassion turn stone into rice? Samita was silent. He listened like a man sitting by a river letting the water tell its own story. Then he said, You are right. Compassion does not turn stone into rice, but compassion turns the human heart into hands that share. Yesterday, Mr. Tanu gave a cow. The villagers contributed rice for Ketu. That is not rice from the sky, but from hearts softening. If you allow it, I will go house to house and ask for a portion of the next harvest for your family. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting suffering. Forgiveness means not letting that suffering block the path of love. Danta lowered his face. Tears flowed into his gray beard. He sighed, voice rough. Do you truly believe the tigers won't return. I believe, Samita said. But belief does not mean absolutes. It must be nourished daily by mindfulness and by alert vigilance. If there is any sign of danger, I will be the first to stand. Danta was quiet. The storm still churned inside him, but a thin seam of light had just been cut open. The next morning, the entire village was shaken. An 8-year-old boy named Nilan had disappeared. His mother wailed. He followed the dog to the forest's edge, and now he's gone. There are animal tracks, and even a small trail of blood. The village erupted. Shouts rang out. The tiger is back. Where are the spears? We told you compassion can't be trusted. Danta gripped his spear, his face changing color. Enough, no more waiting, I will lead. Villagers grabbed torches, banged pots and pans, and surged toward the forest. The fire of anger burned brighter than the flames. Pavana ran to the temple to find Samita. Master Nilan is missing. They think the tiger took him. If you don't stop them, blood will be spilled. Samita closed his eyes and drew a long breath. He knew this was the trial by fire. He stood draped, his worn yellow robe over his shoulder, took his beads, and strode down to the village. At the forest's edge, chaos reigned. Young men brandished spears, women sobbed, and children clung to their mothers' skirts, trembling. Danta shouted, "Follow me tonight, the tiger's blood must stain this ground." Samita appeared, his voice carrying yet calm. "Stop." The crowd halted. Dozens of eyes locked on him. Danta growled, "Can't you see a child is missing blood on the ground? Animal tracks everywhere. Do you still want us to stand and wait to die?" Samita stepped forward and knelt by the traces. He examined them closely. The blood smears were in small droplets, not thick, like a mortal wound. He picked up a long reddish-brown hair. He looked up. "This is not tiger fur. This is jackal fur." "Are you sure?" Pavana asked urgently. "Certain," Samita replied. "Jackals often stalk chickens and ducks, and may have attacked Nilan's dog. The boy ran after it and got lost in the forest. If we set the forest on fire and hurl our spears, we will kill the wrong target. Let me lead a small group to search. The crowd should stay to guard the village." Whispers rose. Many were doubtful. Danta still gripped his spear. "If you're wrong, if the child dies under a tiger's fangs, his blood will be on your hands." Samita looked straight at him. "If I'm wrong, I accept it. But if you're wrong, the blood will be on the hands of the whole village. Let fear stop here." The air was heavy. After a moment, Pavana and a few young men stepped forward. "We trust you. We'll go with you." Danta growled, then flung his spear to the ground. "Go. But if you don't find him, don't expect me to ever listen to you again." Samita, Pavana, and 3 young men entered the forest with torches. They followed the blood trail through thick brambles. After a while, they heard a faint cry. In a fallen hollow tree, little Nilan was curled up, his leg scratched, with his dog's body beside him. The child was terrified, but not seriously hurt. Samita lifted Nilan and soothed him. "It's all right now, child. It's all right." When the group returned to the village, the whole crowd fell silent. The mother held her child, sobbing. Pavana raised a jackal hair high. He was right. It wasn't a tiger. The crowd gasped, shame mixed with relief. Danta stood stunned, his spear on the ground, feeling twice as heavy. Samita walked up and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do you see, fear easily turns into accusation. Forgiveness is not only for others, it is first for the fear in our own hearts." Danta trembled, then collapsed and burst into tears. The villagers were silent. In that moment, they understood spears cannot defeat fear. Only trust can. But the turmoil did not end. A few days later, bad news arrived in the Kanhari Valley, where Samita had led the tigers. A merchant caravan's horse had been killed. Furious, the merchants came to Valuna demanding compensation. Some even demanded the tiger's life. A burly merchant shouted, "If you don't deal with them, we'll kill them ourselves. Our horse is worth an entire season's goods." The villagers were shaken. Some turned their blame on Samita. "You brought the tigers to Kanhari, and now they've caused trouble for others. We're implicated." Samita knew this was the real climax. His compassion was being tested, not just by tigers, but by people when interests and fear overlapped. He stood in the village square and spoke loudly. "Listen to me. If I run from this, everyone has the right to blame me. But I will not run. I will go to Kanhari, face the tigers again, and find a way to move them farther. Forgiveness is not closing our eyes. Forgiveness is daring to step into danger to transform it." The villagers held their breath. Pavana stepped forward. "I'll go with you." A moment later, Elder Vachira nodded. "I'll go too." This is when our village must learn a shared lesson, not rely on Samita alone. The next day, a small group set out: Samita, Pavana, Vachira, and 3 young men. They reached Kanhari at dusk, the scent of the dead horse still lingering. The tigress appeared wary, her 3 cubs behind her. Samita stepped forward and pressed his palms together. "You broke our agreement. You attacked a horse." "Why?" The tigress growled softly. Her eyes were not exactly fierce, more like pained. Samita looked closely. One leg was injured, caked with dried blood. Perhaps while hunting small prey, she was wounded and forced to go after the horse, an easier target. Samita sighed and turned to the group. "She didn't betray us. She's injured and can't hunt as usual. We have 2 choices: kill her or help her heal so she can hunt on her own." A young man whispered, "But helping her is dangerous." Vachira said, "More dangerous is letting hatred spread." Samita moved closer to the tigress and took a handful of crushed medicinal leaves from his pouch. He sat down, his voice warm. "Let me touch you. Just once. If you bite, I accept it." He extended his hand. The tigress growled softly, baring her teeth, but did not lunge. She trembled, then unexpectedly lowered her injured leg and slowly approached. Samita bent down and pressed the medicine onto the wound. Thin blood welled again, but the leaves adhered. The tigress inhaled sharply, then went quiet. The group watched, their hearts nearly stopping. A young man whispered, This is a miracle." "It's not a miracle," Samita said quietly, as if to himself. "It's just that when we no longer carry enmity, the beast no longer sees us as an enemy." That night they all slept by Kanhari. The tigress lay a few steps away, breathing evenly, the cubs tucked against her belly. Samita meditated, feeling the fragility of each breath, each chance at peace. He knew one mistake could undo everything. But he also knew that if they succeeded, this would be the greatest lesson. Compassion is not only saving another, it is saving the relationship between humans and animals, between village and forest, between fear and forgiveness. The moon shone bright. Samita closed his eyes and prayed silently. Tomorrow may all understand that only compassion is truly stronger than fangs and claws. Morning in Kanhari opened with a gentle milky light. Before the mist could lift, hoofbeats sounded. The merchants returned, faces grim. Leading them was yesterday's burly man, named Maruha, wearing a hide cloak his eyes like two gray stones. Beside him stood two men with spears. Behind them, mules pulled an empty wooden cart, the place of the dead horse now a hollow of loss. Maruha glared at Samita, then at the tigers crouching in the brush. "You're still here. There will be no negotiations today." Pavana stepped forward, standing between the two sides. "Wait. We're not running away. But killing tigers now will only make the forest bleed. Say what you want plainly." Maruha slammed his hand on the cart and spoke through clenched teeth. "Compensation. A strong horse, or silver, equal to it. And the tigers must disappear from this trade route." Elder Vachira raised his voice, warm but firm. "We will compensate, but in a way that preserves life. The tigress attacked because she was injured. We will heal her and move the pack farther, in past the Rakta slope, to the Red Bamboo Valley. There they won't cross the Merchant's Road." Maruha curled his lip. "You talk like you're telling a fairy tale." Samita pressed his palms together and stepped forward. "I will stake my honor on this promise. 3 days. Within 3 days, the tigers will be gone from Kanhari. As for compensation, Valuna will contribute. I will knock on every door, and we will add labor. We'll build your caravan a stronger way station, a sturdier fence, so this does not happen again. You won't just get silver, you'll get lasting safety," the merchants murmured. A younger man named Renu hesitated. "If they keep their word, we gain more than one horse." Maruha stared at Samita for a long time. In those gray eyes there was not only anger, but the fear of a man whose living depends on a fragile root. He drew a breath. 3 days. But if you miss the deadline, we handle it ourselves." 3 days. Samita nodded. When the merchants left, the group exhaled. The tigress lay down, her wound packed with medicine. The 3 cubs tumbled beside her, joyfully alive. Samita sat and opened his hand toward them, his voice gentle as laying a sheet of paper on water. "I will lead you on. But that path needs courage from both sides." The tigress didn't understand the words, but she understood the rhythm. She lowered her head and let out a long breath like acceptance. Samita turned to Pavana and Vashira. "We need 3 lines of work at once. First, set up a compensation and safety fund for the merchants, grain money, timber, and skilled hands. Second, clear a living corridor over the Rakta slope, collect iron traps and stakes, mark a route for the tigers to follow. Third, build a bell warning system around Valuna, bamboo bells at the forest edge, so if animals come down, the village goes to alert without bloodshed." The elder nodded. "I'll go down and handle the first 2. For the bamboo bells, I'll ask the children and mothers. What makes lasting peace must carry their touch." Pavana hefted his axe. "I'll gather the traps. Ketu has experience, I'll recruit him. The one who set traps now removes them. That's how we lock a circle of karma." Samita smiled. "Good." Word spread to Valuna. A different wind rose in the village, the wind of practical work. Tanu laid out timber and nails, barking orders as the young men raised a new fence for the way station. Danta quietly hauled baskets of straw, drove stakes and tied ropes. The hands that had gripped a spear, the hardest, now tied the surest knots. Each person contributed a handful of rice, a bundle of bamboo, a day of labor. In the temple yard, a big basket was set out, with a bamboo sign carved with 4 words: shared effort, shared safety. When Ketu carried a bundle of iron traps into the temple yard, whispers stirred. Someone snorted. Used to set traps, now wants to take them down. Ketu set the traps down and dropped to his knees. "I'm returning my iron teeth to the forest." I volunteer as night watch for the way station, no pay for 3 weeks. If anyone still resents me, go ahead and curse me. I'll take it." Elder Vachira lifted him up and spoke to the crowd. Forgiveness is not erasing a mistake in an hour. Forgiveness is agreeing to let a person have the chance to act differently day after day. Many eyes softened. After a long moment, Danta stepped forward and placed a hand on Ketu's shoulder. "I'll keep watch with you tonight." An invisible cord drew tight. Hammers and saws rang again. The sky looked scrubbed clean. Up in Kanhari, Samita trained the tiger family to follow a travel signal. In the morning, he shook a cluster of dry bamboo strung with a few bone chips. The clicking sound and the scent of dried meat on the wind formed an invisible guide rope. He walked ahead, shaking the cluster and sprinkling scraps from the slaughterhouse. The tigress got used to following the signal, not bolting onto the main road. On day 1, they practiced short stretches. On day 2, they tried the slopes. The tigress's wound began to close. The 3 cubs found surer footing and slipped less. But the Rakta slope was the real test. The narrow path cut the mountain like a giant blade. To the left, a rock wall. To the right, a vast sea of reeds dropping to the stream bed. Pavana and Ketu held ropes tied to stakes they had set the day before as handholds. Samita went first and spoke softly to the tigers, slow. "Breathe in, breathe out." Like that, 1 step at a time. The tigers followed. At times, a cub fumbled and wobbled. In one moment, the youngest slipped, rolling to the edge with only 2 tiny claws holding. Pavana lunged, threw himself forward, grabbed it by the scruff and hauled it up. Everyone held their breath. The little one panicked, dug its claws into Pavana's sleeve and tore it. Pavana laughed the laugh of someone who has just escaped danger and still finds life lovable. "Okay, kid, next time watch your feet." The tigress turned and looked at Pavana for a long time. She didn't growl. In her eyes was a strange glint. Samita recognized it. Moments like this are the strongest cords binding the 2 cliff edges, the human side and the animal side. At the end of day 2, they stopped at a rocky ledge overlooking the red bamboo valley. Below, old bamboo thickets swayed like green waves. In the center lay a warm hollow with big boulders and a shallow ribboning stream. Samita smiled. A new home. They descended slowly. Before the tigers set paw in the valley, Samita paused and pressed his palms together. "From here, I will step back. You will hunt and live on your own. I'll leave a few scent markers on certain rocks if things are too hard. Follow the scent to the stream's edge. There will be a few scraps, but only for a short while. Then each of us will forget the other's scent." The tigress stepped into the valley and drew a long breath, as if marking territory with a peaceful rite. The cubs bounded after big grasshoppers. Samita lit a bamboo incense stick, planted it in the ground, and prayed silently. May this place be a gentle border. That night they stretched a coarse cloth at the forest's edge. Pavana fell asleep the moment his head touched his hand. Ketu stayed up to tend the fire. Samita and the elder sat facing each other with a kettle bubbling between them. Vachira watched the flame and said, "Tomorrow we return to the village to finish the last part, full compensation, the way station complete, and a covenant between Valuna and the merchants. You meanwhile need a session to pull the final pin from people's hearts." "You mean?" Danta Vachira smiled slightly. "He has tied his pain to a tight knot of anger. Help him unfasten the last knot." Samita nodded, his eyes calm as an autumn lake. Day 3. The tiger family was settled. Samita left a few scent markers, medicinal leaves, and dried bones hung on branching twigs to mark boundaries. Then they all returned to Kanhari, crossing Rakta. When they reached the merchant's way station, the sight stunned them. A new fence of resinous wood and old bamboo stood solid dog passages cut in the base, a small wooden watchtower above with a thick thatch roof. A trash trench and ash pit were dug. Over the gate hung a newly carved wooden sign, Kanhari Way Station, where travelers are sheltered. Maruha and his men stood there, their faces less hard-edged. Renu ran out to greet them. You really did this in 2 days. Not just the fence, there's a new horse stall and a water trough too. Tanu stood close by the gate, still holding a hammer. Danta and Ketu were on the watchtower taking turns. Villagers brought baskets of grain rice and a little silver to make a chest. Elder Vachira handed the chest to Maruha. This is compensation and an apology turned into useful work. From now on, anyone passing through will strike the bamboo wind chimes 3 times to signal people are near. The forest will hear it, the village will hear it, and the merchants will hear it too. Maruha opened the chest, looked at the small bags tied carefully, and the old yet bright silver coins, then closed the lid. He exhaled a breath no longer smelling of iron. I've met many villages. Few respond so quickly with work like this. All right, I accept, and I'll sign the covenant from now on. If there's another loss, we first review it together. No drawing swords. Renu smiled. We have something else to give. He carried out a small bronze bell. This bell will hang at the way station. When there's trouble, instead of shouting, we ring the bell. Its sound carries far and deep. The elder touched the bell, his eyes brightening. This bell, half its sound, is for people, half for the forest. They pulled the rope together. The bell rang out, thin and long, like a thread of sound smoke drawing an arc in the air. In that moment, everyone stood still, hearing their own heartbeats answer the bell. At dusk, Samita walked toward Danta's house. The man sat on the porch beside the old rope from his calf and a plow with a chipped blade. Seeing Samita, he stood uneasy. I don't know how to begin, Danta said hoarsely. Samita sat on the wooden step and set his beads on his knees, with the truth. Danta looked out over the fields, after the harvest stubble still jutted from the paddies yellow, like an old person's hair. I hated the tigers. I hated the night wind. I hated even words of comfort. I thought gripping a spear meant gripping my family's fate. But these past days, pounding stakes, standing night watch, hearing the bell, I realized the spear in the heart is the most frightening. He turned back, eyes wet, but not cloudy. Can you? Forgive me. Samita shook his head, smiling. I never held your fault in my hand. To forgive. Forgive yourself first. Forgive the man who lost a calf and almost lost his faith. And if there's still a weight in your chest, place it in the sound of the bell. Danta bowed his head. He lifted the old rope and tied it to the porch beam. I'll hang it here as a reminder. So later, when my hand itches for a spear again, I'll remember I've tied a different cord, a gentler one. They sat quietly for a long time. The wind carried the scent of fresh straw. From afar, bamboo wind chimes at the forest's edge wove their faint sounds. At night, oil lamps dotted the temple yard like stars. The village held a small ceremony called the unpinning ceremony. 4 items were placed in the center. A section of iron trap Ketu brought an old rope from Danta's home, a broken arrow Samita had caught that day, and a small sack of rice from Tanu. Elder Vachara said, "These 4 objects attest to 4 habits. The trap, our habit of harming each other. The rope, our habit of binding ourselves with hatred. The arrow, our habit of quick accusation. The rice, our habit of clinging. Today we unpin them." He touched each item in turn. Ketu snapped the trap in 2 and threw it into the fire. Danta dropped the rope into an old chest and shut the lid. Pavana stuck the broken arrow in the earth bank so it would stand as a reminder stake. Tanu opened the rice sack and scattered it into a clay bowl. Children cheered as sparrows swooped down from the eaves. Laughter burst forth, the kind that comes after days taut as a drawn string. Samita spoke softly, but clearly. Compassion does not make the past disappear. It puts the past in its right place so we can keep going lighter. The bronze bell rang briefly again. Someone began an old lullaby. The small oil lights were still like tiny seeds of light. 3 days had passed. Samita, Pavana, and Ketu went up to Kanhari one last time to check the markers. Along the way, they found newly hung bamboo chimes. The children had set them up everywhere as asked, 1 at each forest edge. Wind moving through the bamboo tubes sounded like people calling to each other with their breath. At the edge of red bamboo, they stopped, not going too deep. From the bamboo thicket, the tigress appeared standing on a rock staring. The wound had dried. Her foot touched down without limping. The 3 cubs beside her were rounder, their coats sleeker. The tigress neither advanced nor retreated. Samita pressed his palms together and bowed very slowly like a farewell. The tigress replied by turning her head, circling the rock, and leading her cubs out of sight into the brush, a way of saying heard in the language of the forest. Pavana exhaled. So she's staying. Ketu gazed into the distance, and we withdraw. Samita smiled. Inside him a cord, long stretched tight, slackened, not snapped. It simply became a low note. He turned and said softly, "Let's go home." At week's end, the Kanhari way station was inaugurated. The merchants hung an extra flag to honor the covenant. Renu handed Samita a small piece of tanned leather, engraved with 2 interlocking circles. Road. Village. Keep it, so people know there is a place where the road and the home have learned to live together. Maruha arrived late, his face still hard, but his eyes no longer like whetstone. He extended his hand. "I'll give thanks in a traveler's way. Wherever there's a market, I'll tell this story." Samita shook his hand. The rough hand of a man who works in wind and sand gripped the slender hand of a monk. 2 lives touched in a wordless agreement. When something happens, speak before you draw the blade. That night, Samita returned to the monastery on the slopes of Satara. The evening bell rang 3 short times. Beneath the sala tree, he sat again. The valley wind swept through, carrying many voices from the past few days. A mother's cries for her child, Maruha's harsh bark, Pavana's laughter, Danta's sigh, the tigress's silence, all mixed together, becoming a piece that wasn't hazy, a piece with eyes. He recalled his teacher's words. To resolve is not to press down until it's quiet. To resolve is to open until it flows. In his heart, a closing sentence finished. It's weave. Compassion is the way wisdom chooses to pass through truth, and forgiveness is the way the heart chooses to pass through people. His breathing steadied, shoulders relaxed. Above the stars were strewn thin as salt. Far away, perhaps the red bamboo valley also held a striped back, settling down 3 small bellies, rising and falling asleep. The next morning, Samita stopped by Nilan's home. The boy sat on the porch, his leg wrapped in medicinal leaves, holding another puppy his father had brought home. The mother poured Samita a cup of leaf tea, her eyes no longer stormy. My son says that at night, when he hears the bell, he feels at peace. Samita smiled. The bell outside calls each other. The bell inside calls oneself. He stood. Before leaving the porch, he looked toward the end of the village where people were stacking rice in the communal store for the coming season. Beside the storehouse, children hung another bamboo chime and tugged it to test. The bell rang thin and long. Danta passed by, stopped, looked up, and nodded slightly. Samita pressed his palms together and faced the forest, silently grateful for what had happened at the necessary times, accidents, misunderstandings, and harsh words. Nothing was extra. Nothing was meaningless if we let them teach us. He adjusted his robe and stepped onto the path skirting the fields, heading toward the hamlet of Santi, where tomorrow he would tell this story to the children in their way. Few words, much quiet. That evening on the temple porch, when villagers asked for a short line to keep in their hearts, Samita said, "There are two swords we should forge: patience and mindfulness, then use them to protect a third: compassion." He bowed. Elder Vachira set a hand on his shoulder and gently squeezed a wordless congratulations. Night slid over the temple roof. At the end of night came dawn, as always. But on this dawn, the bamboo chimes sounded softer, and people heard more within that softness. Morning in Viluna. The market opened like a small river. People set out baskets of rice and trays of fish. Greetings wove into a bright clamor. Amid the bustle, a crowd gathered. A man named Ravi was arguing fiercely with a woman named Lyra over a basket of salt. "This salt is twice as salty. You mixed sand in it, didn't you?" Ravi shouted, face flushed. "I swear I didn't. You're slandering me to force the price." Lyra burst into tears. The crowd grew noisy, some siding with Ravi, some with Lyra. The air swelled like a flame about to catch. Children were pulled aside. A few young men had already gripped bamboo sticks. Happening by, Samita saw the scene and stepped in. He didn't yell or call for silence. He simply took the small bamboo bell from the market porch and rang a short sequence. Ding, ding, ding. The sound rang out thin, but long, touching ears, hot with anger. The crowd fell quiet for a moment. Samita held up the bell and spoke gently. "In Viluna, when we're angry, we ring the bell before saying another word, so the head remembers that the heart needs to hear too." He turned to Ravi. "Will you wait one bell's beat before speaking again?" Ravi panted, but his eyes were caught by that calm. He nodded stiffly. The bell lingered one more beat. Then Ravi spoke, his voice less sharp. "I lost my nephew to illness yesterday. I haven't recovered. This morning I tasted the salt, found it strong, and suspicion rose. Perhaps I spoke too harshly." The crowd murmured. Lyra sniffled. "I swear I didn't mix sand. If you want, I'll add another handful of salt." Samita smiled. "Add salt, and it's salty. Add forgiveness, and it's sweet. Which flavor do we want?" Laughter broke out. The tension popped like a bubble. Ravi bowed his head. "I'm sorry, Lyra." The woman wiped her tears and added a handful of salt to his basket. Scattered applause followed. From a quarrel, that morning's market became a living lesson. Forgiveness doesn't begin with preaching, but with one bell beat, so people can return to themselves. Meanwhile, Ketu was facing his own test. He had taken the night watch at the Kanhari way station. One night, a group of 5 or 6 strangers appeared with wooden bows and sharp spears. They whispered, "This is where the tigers are. Tiger hides fetch a high price. If the watchman doesn't stop us, we'll do it tonight." Ketu blocked them. His heart pounded. Memories of poaching years surged, urging him to look the other way for a cut. But he remembered Samhita's words. Forgiveness is agreeing to let a person have the chance to act differently. Today, that chance was testing him. He drew a deep breath and said, "No. The tigers have been moved, and there's a covenant. Whoever kills them betrays all of Valuna." The men snorted. "You were a poacher. Now you play night move." One shoved his shoulder. Ketu nearly fell, but he gripped his bamboo spear, planted his feet, and held steady. He growled, "I hunted once because my stomach was empty. I stand guard now because my heart is light. To pass, you'll have to step over my corpse." His resolve made them hesitate. After a moment, they left cursing loudly. Ketu sank down sweating as if bathed, but his heart had never felt lighter. For the first time, he felt truly forgiven by himself. On another day, Danta faced a new loss. His last water buffalo fell ill and died. He sat by the body, old eyes dim. In the past, he would have screamed, "Cursed heaven," blamed the tigers, blamed everything. This time, he was silent. He took the old rope from the porch, tied it around the buffalo's horns, and whispered, "You plowed many seasons with me. Now you go, I won't tighten down. Go in peace." He pressed his palms together and rang the bamboo bell 3 times. His son Javan looked at his father in surprise. "Dad, you're not angry." Danta patted his head. "If I get angry, who will bury the buffalo? If I forgive, the buffalo goes, but the fields remain. I still have you, the village, the bell. I choose to keep what remains." Javan hugged him. Tears fallen not from fear, but from understanding something more. Forgiveness is choosing the living part that remains to care for. Good news arrived unexpectedly. While gathering firewood with the children, Pavana found tiger tracks at the edge of red bamboo. Strangely beside them was an old cow bone carried and set neatly like a return gift. People wondered, had the tiger family left a sign of gratitude? Samhita only smiled. Tigers can't say thank you in words, but they can say it by not coming back to bite. That's thanks enough. The villagers nodded. In their hearts, the wall between them and the forest had grown much lower. They began to believe that forest and people could live together if they kept their promises and forgave each other's mistakes. One evening, the temple yard filled again. The villagers asked Samhita to tell the whole story. He sat on the stone step firelight, flickering over his gentle face. Children crowded in front, elders behind everyone listening in silence. Samhita told of the first meeting with the tigress, from the hunger in her eyes to the bowed farewell at Red Bamboo. He didn't embellish or call it a miracle. He said it was the patience of compassion and the strength of forgiveness. Then he closed with a few words. Hatred is a fire burning in the palm. Hold it to take revenge, and you will be the one burned. Forgiveness is releasing the fire into the water. No one gets burned. The temple yard was utterly still. Then from the back, Danta struck the bell. Its sound carried far, blending with the wind. One by one, the villagers pressed their palms together. They knew that the story of the hungry tiger was not only a forest tale, but a tale of every heart in the village. The story of the monk and the hungry tigress is not just a clash between fangs and a saffron robe, but a very quiet negotiation between humans and animals. and deeper still, between the instinct to devour everything and the compassion that wants to heal everything. When the tigress stepped back, when the monk slowly opened his hand, we could see clearly compassion is not a blanket to hide from life. It is a discipline of the heart. It keeps fear from taking the throne and makes the must fight, must win, must destroy inside us pause and listen. Compassion is not weak. Compassion has a spine. It looks straight at the truth. There is hunger. There is fear. There are wounds. There are losses. But instead of pouring oil on the fire, compassion brings cool water, patience, understanding action in the right place. Forgiveness is the same. It does not erase what happened, bleach memory, or deny pain. Forgiveness puts the past in the right place, so the present can breathe, so the heart carries less, so our hands are free to support what is alive before us. In each of us, there is a hungry tiger. Sometimes anger flaring like straw fire, sometimes fear smoldering like embers, sometimes resentment coiling at the bottom of the heart. If we feed it with spite, with "I'm right, you're wrong" with the habit of accusing to feel satisfied, it will grow quickly and tear us apart before it reaches anyone else. But if each day we feed it with understanding and love, a long breath, before replying a warm look given to a mistake, a decision to act instead of complain, the tiger will step back. It doesn't vanish immediately, but it stops being in charge. And when it's no longer in charge, both we and others can live. Remember Valuna's bamboo bell, thin, long, and very simple. Before a hot word shoots out like an arrow, people ring the bell, not to deny the truth or lull anger to sleep, but to remind, let wisdom speak alongside the heart. One bell is a small space to breathe, just enough for the words about to fly, to dull their edge, for the gaze to soften, for the clenched hand to loosen. Ringing the bell teaches the tiger in the heart to sit down, so there's room for a gentle word, a fair offer, a solution that requires neither blood nor tears. Because in the end, real strength is not in the shout. Strength is the ability to pass through fear without letting it lead us by the nose. Courage is not trembling. Courage is keeping the heart open while still trembling. The monk did not push death away with miracles, but with steady presence and small choices made again and again, listening, observing, setting kind boundaries, and finding the least painful way for both banks, human and animal. If today you feel the tiger in your heart growling, try 3 very small things. 1. Stop for 1 beat. Instead of firing the first arrow, a sentence that tears someone, take a slow breath. 2. Strike the bell within. Remind yourself. The goal is not to win the argument. The goal is to protect what matters between us. 3. Choose a cool action. Ask a question, offer help, or simply say, I need a minute. These small things don't make you lose. They return the reins to you. And as the story of the monk and the hungry tigress shows, whenever we choose compassion, the world around us gains another option. No one has to die for someone else to live. Forgiveness, then, is no longer a slogan. It's how we reset our inner order, so that tomorrow morning we wake lighter and see that others are still others, not enemies. And if one day you don't have a bamboo bell, like the people of Valuna, borrow your heartbeat as the bell. Each beat is a soft ding. Hear it, and you'll know it's time to step back half a pace to move forward for a lifetime. The story of the mother and the last bowl of rice. Morning in the hamlet of Nalika, on the banks of the Ganges, opened with a soft, milk-like light. The water lay flat like a long mirror, reflecting the pale blue sky. Water carriers passed by. Wind drifted over the bamboo groves. But that year the dry season dragged on. Rice boats came in rarely. The market thinned, and the stories told by the hearth began to carry the smell of worry. In a straw-roofed hut at the far edge of the hamlet lived a mother and her 2 children, Amala. A thin woman, with her hair tied neatly behind her neck. Her 10-year-old son, Kiran, lively, but often the one to yield his portion. And 7-year-old Lila, who liked to tie bamboo leaves into dolls. Amala's husband had died 3 years earlier in a bout of marsh fever. Since then, the young woman had been mother-father and shoulder for herself to lean on. This morning, Amala opened the rice jar. The grains no longer rattled. Only a thin layer remained enough to cook a small bowl of rice. The old clay pot had a broken handle, but it was clean scrubbed with ash. Amala poured the scant rice into the pot, added water, and set it on the straw stove. The smoke curled into thin ribbons, and the smell of cooking rice seeped into the morning. Kiran looked at his mother, trying to sound casual. "Mom, can I go down to the riverbank to gather old firewood to trade for flatbread?" Today, Amala stroked his head. "Stay home with your sister today. I'll go." The riverbank is crowded now, too easy for trouble to happen. Lila hugged her leaf doll. "Mom, the doll says she's hungry too." Amala laughed, then fell quiet. That small bowl of rice, if split 3 ways, would become thin spoonfuls, but it was all the house had left. Just as the rice began to steam, a cough came from outside the door. Could someone spare me a little something to eat? Amala turned. In the doorway stood an old beggar, clothes torn in several places, eyes sunken and gentle. He leaned on a stick, his lips dry as cracked earth. In this valley, beggars were a familiar sight, but at that moment, the plea felt like a needle, pricking the only bowl of rice in the house. Kiran stepped quickly, instinctively wanting to shut the door. But Amala stopped his hand and looked deeply into the old man's eyes. "Where have you come from?" "Down from Red Bamboo," he said. "I haven't had a proper meal in 3 days. I heard there are still kind people in this hamlet, so I took a chance and knocked." Kiran bit his lip. "Mom, Lila and I haven't eaten since last night." The beggar bowed his head. "If there's nothing left here, I'll go. I don't want to be a burden." Amala looked at the pot. The warmth rising from it seemed to place a question on the hearth. "Who is this rice for?" In her ear, the deep voice of a monk who had passed through the hamlet not long ago. Sadayu suddenly echoed, "When your hand closes, the grain of rice belongs to one household. When your hand opens, the grain becomes a bridge between many households. Either choice has a price, Amala, but the price of an open hand is usually a lighter heart." Amala scooped the rice into a bowl. It was small but full. She set it before the beggar and nudged it toward him. "Eat. Eat slowly," Mom Kiran blurted. Lila looked up at the bowl as if watching the moon pulled away by clouds. Her eyes shone, but her small hand did not snatch it back. She hugged her doll and nuzzled into her mother's shoulder. The beggar was stunned. He pressed his palms together. "I'll say this first, I am no holy man. I am only hungry. But hunger, when it sees kindness, knows how to weep." He ate slowly, each spoonful, like gathering a lifetime. When he finished, he set the bowl down and bowed very low. "Your home has saved my life." On my way back to Red Bamboo, If I still have breath, I will tell this story at every hearth I pass." He left his figure shrinking in the sun. The wind across the porch sounded thinner. The stove no longer smelled of rice, only warm ash. Kieran stood a long time. He turned away and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, an action tougher than his years. "I'm not angry. I'm just hungry." Amala sat both children down. She poured warm water into 3 cups. Water won't fill the belly, but it cools the fire inside. "This afternoon I'll find something. Before I go, I want to tell you this: when we keep everything, we have enough, but others lack. When we share, sometimes we lack, but the heart is full. With a full heart, we can stand through lean days." Lila asked softly, "Mom, what if he was a bad person? If he was bad, that bowl of rice won't make him good right away. But the bowl of rice keeps me good. And one day, a bad person may still remember that someone chose not to throw a stone." Kieran nodded, trying to swallow something down, a still empty throat. News of the mother who gave away her last bowl of rice spread through the hamlet as quickly as a change of season's wind. At the market, Lyra, the salt seller, said, half sympathetic, half reproachful, "Rice is scarce, and you gave away the last bowl. Was that wise?" Ravi, the firewood hauler, shook his head. "Wise or foolish? The full say it's foolish. The hungry who are fed call it wise. I only know that when you're hungry and someone gives you, remember it for life." At noon, Elder Sadayu visited the hamlet. He walked barefoot, his yellow robe threadbare, a monk's staff in hand. Seeing Amala spreading straw to dry, he stopped. "I heard the wind tell of your home." Amala pressed her palms together, a little embarrassed. "I only did what I thought I should." "And where did that 'should' come from, Amala?" he asked. "From hunger and seeing someone hungrier," she said. Sadayu smiled. "When you put yourself in another's stomach, your heart opens. When you put another in your own stomach, your heart narrows. You chose to open." Kieran stood nearby, eyes half respectful, half hesitant, reverent. "But I'm really very hungry." Sadayu looked at Kieran as one looks at a grown man. "You were hungry and did not snatch. That is courage. Tonight, if there is anything cooking at Sadayu's hearth, Sadayu will stop by." He left the monk's staff tapping a slow rhythm on the dirt road. Evening came. Amala went to the riverbank. Up on the landing, people haggled over firewood prices. Wooden boats knocked together. She waded onto the sandbar, searching for dry reed roots and dead branches carried by the current. The sun sank lower gold, breaking on the water into shards. Amala suddenly saw the beggar from that morning sitting beneath the embankment, clutching his belly with 2 boiled sweet potatoes beside him. Seeing her, he startled and stood. "I begged, and a kind soul gave me these. I kept one for your household." Amala was taken aback for a moment. He set the potato in her hand, his wrinkled smile bright. "That's the bowl of rice coming back." Amala wanted to refuse, but the old man shook his head. "This potato is lighter than a bowl of rice, but it weighs as much as a lifetime of gratitude." She thanked him, brought the potato home, and divided it into 3 parts. Kieran bit a small piece, his eyes lighting as if a flame had touched his belly. Lila hugged her portion and broke it in 2 halves for the doll. All 3 burst into laughter, the kind of laughter that fills a hut more than anything else. Night fell. A young moon hung like a scythe that had set down its edge. At the edge of the hamlet, a short chant rose like a lullaby. Amala placed her hand on her chest, listening to her heartbeat, the bell within. She closed her eyes and whispered, Tomorrow, if there is another bowl of grain, I will still open my hand. But please, grant me the wisdom to open it in the right place." Outside on the porch, wind brushed the cluster of beans hanging to dry, making a clicking sound like the bamboo chimes in Viluna, a sound that reminds people to pause before they flare up or clamp shut. The next morning, the second test came. Ravi, the firewood hauler, ran up panting. "There's a thief at the riverbank. Says he's hungry, but he snatched the widow Suta's basket and ran. People chased him, caught him, and are beating him. Some say it's the same beggar." Amala's heart clenched. Kiran pressed his lips tight. Mom gave to the wrong person. Amala said nothing. She picked up Lila, told Kiran to watch his sister, and ran to the bank. There, a ring of people had formed. A scrawny man had his wrists tied with coir rope face, smeared with sand eyes darting. Widow Suta trembled, clutching her basket with a broken handle. Young men shouted. One had already raised a stick, waiting only for a nod. Amala pushed in. "Wait," a man glared. "Village business, what's a woman doing stepping in?" Amala bowed to Suta. "Are you hurt?" "No, but I nearly lost everything," Suta said, hugging the basket like her own entrails. Amala turned to the tied man. "Who are you? Are you the man who stood at my door yesterday morning?" "No," he stammered. "I'm from another hamlet." Amala looked straight at him. This was not the beggar from yesterday. These eyes were not deep and gentle. They were scattered and shifty of a man weary and afraid, different from hunger with self-respect. A young man snapped, "Whoever he is, a thief, deserves a beating." Amala sighed and spoke slowly. "He is wrong, but beating makes both the one who beats and the one who's beaten cheaper. We'll keep him tied and bring him to Elder Sadayu. If he's hungry and foolish, we feed and teach. If he's deceitful, the covenant will judge." The crowd eased. A habit of explosion had just been held back by a voice, soft yet firm. They led the man away. On the way, Ravi asked hesitantly, "I heard you gave your last bowl of rice. Was the old man yesterday?" "No." Amala shook her head lightly. "But even if it was, I would still choose the same." "Why?" "Because if I don't choose, I'll starve in my heart. An empty stomach passes in a day. A starved heart eats away at a whole year." Ravi fell silent. His broad shoulders lowered half an inch, as if he had set down an invisible burden. That afternoon in front of the temple yard, Elder Sadayu sat on the stone step listening to both sides. The thief kept his head down, voice timid. "I'm hungry. My wife is sick. I was foolish." Widow Suta pressed her lips. "If you're hungry, ask." "Why snatch?" I asked at many places. I was ashamed. Amala asked to say a word. Elder hunger makes people tremble. Shame makes hands reckless. If we beat him, the recklessness thickens. If we give and set conditions, the recklessness thins. Sadayu nodded. "The village covenant says, for a first offense we don't beat. We correct first. Repeat offenders are punished heavily. This man will work 3 days at the landing carrying water for Widow Suta. The village will share 2 bushels of grain with his household. Who agrees?" Hands went up in waves. The small storm dissolved. Overhead, a flock of sparrows zigzagged down to drink from a puddle by the yard. Sadayu tapped his staff. "The hunger of the belly can be answered with rice. The hunger of the heart is answered only by seeing each other." Amala went home, her hands lighter. Leela ran out to meet her. Kiran stood by the door. She hugged them both. "Tomorrow I'll go early to the landing with you. We'll gather reed roots, split straw, and trade for flatbread. enough for a decent meal. Kieran nodded hard. Lila raised her leaf doll. The doll nods too. The three of them laughed a smile that didn't fill but warmed. That night, Amala sat on the porch gazing toward red bamboo. She thought of the beggar, the bowl of rice gone, and the potato returned. Thought of the thief, the torn basket, and 3 days of labor. Thought of tomorrow, the reed roots, straw, and flatbread. A string of small deeds was joining, giving, receiving, repairing, learning. She whispered, "If compassion is the way wisdom passes through truth, then forgiveness is the way the heart passes through people." The wind stirred the cluster of dried beans. The tiny clicking sounded like a heartbeat. Amala closed her eyes and listened to the bell within. Morning in Nalika began with talk, even before the roosters finished. People repeated the story of Amala giving her last bowl of rice to a beggar. Some praised it as a rare act in hard times, but many whispers called her foolish, saying she was making her children suffer. At the market, Lyra the salt seller shook her head. To a customer, "Kindness is precious, but kindness doesn't feed children. If you give everything away, what will you live on?" Ravi the firewood hauler answered, "Without kindness we're nothing but stomachs." Amala went hungry, but she kept the whole hamlet's heart warm. That's something. Two streams of opinion collided and spread like small waves. Every roof added its own gossip, turning Amala into the most mentioned name of the lean season. At the straw hut, Amala kept to her routine. She rose early to light the stove and told Kieran and Lila to gather small sticks. On the porch, Lila's leaf doll lay in the sun eyes, stitched from black beans. Kieran looked at his mother and spoke plainly. "I heard at the market they say you're foolish. They say we'll starve to death." Amala smiled and wiped her hands. "They have a right to think so. A fearful stomach speaks harshly. But you know the most frightening death isn't from hunger. It's dying slowly of selfishness." Kieran pressed his lips. "But I'm still hungry. Do I have permission to be angry?" "You may be angry. Anger is a gust of wind. But don't let the wind blow your house away. Learn to stand still, and the wind will pass." The boy was silent, but his eyes brightened as if he understood a part of it. One afternoon, when Amala went to the riverbank to trade for firewood, she met a group of strangers. Leading them was a young monk named Rahulya, tall and slender, saffron robe, clean eyes, deep like a still lake. Beside him was a boy of about 6, dirty-faced, and in rags, separated from his mother. Rahulya bowed to Amala. "Madam, I've heard people tell how you gave away your last bowl of rice. I've traveled many places and rarely seen a heart so open." Amala flushed and dipped her head. "I only did what I thought I should. But now that kindness has left me and my children lacking." Rahulya looked at the child. "This is Anura. He has been separated from his mother for 3 days. I took him along hoping to find his kin. But traveling in a drought, I have nothing but robes. I also need a roof to shelter him for a while." Anura hid behind Rahulya, eyes bewildered. Amala looked and her heart tightened. She thought of her own children if Leela or Kieran were lost. "What then?" she said softly. "If you don't mind a thatched hut, please stay. If there's little, we share a little. With more people, there's more laughter." Rahulya pressed his palms together. Gratitude. This sharing feeds not just bodies, but hearts. That night, the little hut had extra sleeping space. Kieran gave Anura an old blanket. Lila held out her leaf doll. "You can borrow it to sleep with." Anura smiled for the first time since getting lost. That child's smile made the hut feel as if another lamp had been lit. Rahulya sat with Amala by the warm ashes, voice low. You know, compassion is like a flame in the night. If we keep it to ourselves, the flame is small, lighting only one corner. When we share it, each torch catches, and the long night is lit. Amala nodded. I understand. But sometimes staring into an empty pot, I feel afraid. I fear tomorrow when the children cry from hunger, I won't know what to give them. Fear is real. Compassion doesn't erase fear. It only gives us the strength to keep walking, even while afraid. Like your bowl of rice, it didn't banish hunger forever, but it opened a path for hearts to find each other. The next day, word spread that Amala had given shelter to monk Rahulya and little Anura. Some rejoiced, but others spoke ill. Giving away one bowl was foolish enough, and now she's added another mouth. She's courting death. The rumor swelled. At its peak, someone slandered that Amala was putting on a show for praise, wanting fame across the region. The slander reached Lira's ears, then Elder Sadayu's. At noon, during a village meeting in the temple yard, someone stood to accuse Amala does this just to be praised. While our children grow thinner by the day, she feeds outsiders. Isn't that a betrayal of the village? The air was taut as a drawn string. Those who supported Amala said little. The doubtful were loud. Kiran stood beside his mother, fists trembling. Leela clutched her mother's hem, whispering, Mom, do they hate you? Amala bowed slightly and answered softly, Not hate. They are afraid. And when people are afraid, they often say words that hurt. Elder Sadayu looked around, voice deep, Let Amala speak. Amala stepped into the center of the yard and looked into each face. She did not justify or complain. She said, That day, I saw an old man hungrier than I was. I could have kept the bowl of rice for myself and my children, but I thought, if I die tomorrow, what will my children learn? To keep everything or to open their hands, I chose to open my hand because I want my children to grow up with hearts wide enough to survive a long life. If that brings blame, I accept it. The entire yard fell silent. Rahulya stood, voice clear. I am a monk who travels widely. I confirm that Amala gave shelter to me and this child, but she asked for no praise, sought no name. On the contrary, she shared the very least she had. If that is betrayal, then such betrayal is a seed that saves. The crowd murmured. Some bowed their heads, some flushed. Elder Sadayu tapped his staff. The fearful are quick to build slander, but compassion needs little defense. Time will answer. Watch first, judge later. That night in the hut, Kiran said to his mother, Mom, I hate those who call you a liar. Amala hugged him, voice gentle as a lullaby. Hatred only weighs you down. Forgiveness isn't because they deserve it. It's because you need to breathe lightly. Put down the stone, and you can run far. Kiran buried his face in her chest, eyes hot, but heart soothed. The next day, a new trial struck. A harsher drought swept in. Wells sank, fields cracked. Villagers rationed water by the bucket. Scarcity turned fear into a simmering anger. During this time, little Anura fell ill with a high fever. Amala used up their stored water to sponge him. Kiran watched, eyes angry. Mom, that's our last water. Amala wiped the boy's forehead and answered softly, If he dies of thirst, the water in the jar becomes meaningless. Living isn't just keeping water, it's keeping our shared breath. Kiran went outside and punched a bamboo stalk, but soon he returned, sitting silently by the child and fanning him with a palm leaf fan. The hardness in his gaze slowly softened. Those days, Amala faced constant tests, rumors, hunger, drought, sickness. But each time she chose to keep her heart open instead of closed. Outsiders saw foolishness, but her 2 children grew day by day through living lessons. Inside, Amala still trembled and feared. But each time she remembered Sadayu's words, compassion doesn't erase fear. It gives us the strength to step even while afraid. And she stepped day by day. The midsummer sun hung high, its light striking the cracked earth like an old person's skin. Nalika was tense. The well had dropped to where only a few buckets could be drawn each morning. People snapped at each other. Quarrels grew frequent, children cried from thirst, and adults' eyes were red from lack of sleep. In that atmosphere, a great crisis hit. Anura disappeared. That morning, Kiran searched the hut for him and couldn't find him. The child's blanket still held warmth, but no one knew where he'd gone. Leela clutched her leaf doll, tears streaming. Mom, where is Anura? Amala's heart clenched. She rushed into the yard to ask neighbors. One said, I saw him wandering near the field edge at dawn, and then no more. The news spread quickly. The village buzzed. Suspicious looks turned toward Amala. One person whispered to another, and murmurs became accusations. The child had no one to claim him. Amala took him in, and now he's missing. Who's responsible? Someone who gave away her last bowl. Would she be foolish enough to neglect her own children to care for someone else's? For all we know, she gave the child away to someone for a reward. The accusations landed like stones. By evening, a crowd gathered in the temple yard. Elder Sadayu sat silently on the stone step. Villagers clamored. Some demanded punishment for Amala for failing her duty. Lyra pointed voice sharp as a blade. A mother who lets the child she took in disappear, is she trustworthy? Yesterday she gave away her last bowl. Today, a life is lost. How can compassion be so irresponsible? Amala stood within the ring of people, her 2 children pressed behind her. Kiran's face flushed, ready to protest, but Amala stopped him. She looked around, voice steady. I don't know where Anura went. When I woke this morning, I felt as much pain as anyone. But remember, he's a child, not a commodity for me to trade. He stayed in my hut for days, slept beside my children, called me mother. Do you think I could abandon him? A man growled. Words aren't proof. If the child isn't found, we'll hold you responsible. Murmurs rose again, taut as wind before a storm. Just then the young monk Rahulya entered, his saffron robe dusted from the road. He raised a hand. Please stop. To accuse someone before the truth is clear is like picking up a stone to throw into your own eye. Lyra snapped. But you're an outsider. You defend her. Why should we trust you? Rahulya was calm. I defend no one. I'm saying search before you judge. A lost child is not only Amala's burden. This is our village, isn't it? Elder Sadayu tapped, his staff voice ringing. Right. Tomorrow, in the cool of the day, I'll lead a group to search along the forest edge for Anura. Until we see a body or a living child, no one is allowed to pass judgment. The crowd quieted, but suspicious eyes still bored into Amala. That night, Amala didn't sleep. She sat on the porch, eyes on the dark, her heart weighed down like a stone. Kiran sat beside her and whispered, Mom, they hate you. I want to shout that you're not wrong. Amala placed her hand on his shoulder. If you shout, you'll add one more loud voice to the crowd. But if you keep the fire inside, you'll have the strength to look for him tomorrow. Forgive their words, so we'll still have strength. Kiran was silent, but tears fell. The next morning, the search party set out. Rahulya, Amala, Ravi, and several young men went. They brought torches, ropes, and some dry rations. The path along the red bamboo forest was full of dust and gravel. At the forest edge, Ravi suddenly stopped and pointed to the ground. There are small footprints. These must be a child's. They followed them. The footprints led to a thicket, then disappeared. Next to them were several larger, deeper prints. Rahulya frowned. These are an adult's footprints. Someone led him away. The group was shaken. If true, Anura hadn't wandered off by himself. A little farther on, they heard a faint moan. In a low rock hollow lay Anura, curled up, face bluish. Next to him were marks from rope that had been hastily cut. The boy gasped. "A strange man pulled me along. I bit him. He got angry, threw me in here, then ran." Amala hugged Anura tightly, her eyes blurring. "My child, I'm sorry I let this happen to you." Rahulya looked around and said, "Who was he? Why?" "Take a child," Anura panted, unable to say more. The group carried him back to the village. When they returned, the crowd surged forward. Seeing Anura alive, the villagers exhaled with relief, but were also embarrassed. Some mumbled apologies to Amala. Others remained silently ashamed. Elder Sadayu stepped down from the stone step and placed a hand on Amala's shoulder. People are quickest to suspect those who dare to open their hearts. You were wronged, but the truth has spoken. This is a lesson for the whole village. Fear turns people into accusers, while compassion bears hardship until clarity appears. Amala knelt, tears rolling down. She said softly, "I only wish for the child's peace. As for the accusations, I set them down last night." But the climax had not ended. As Anura was laid to rest in the hut, word came the stranger had been caught at the river landing. He turned out to be a drifter trying to sell the child to a distant slave-trading caravan. The villagers were furious and wanted to deal with him on the spot. The crowd closed in, sticks raised. Shouts rang out, "Kill him, don't let him live." The frenzy boiled over as if one spark would set the whole place ablaze. Amala pushed her way in and spread her arms in front of the trembling man. "Wait. Yes, he is wrong. But if we kill him, will we be any less hungry or thirsty? Tie him up and hand him to the elder. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting crime go. It means not letting more blood soak this ground." The villagers hesitated. Elder Sadayu stepped forward, his voice clear. "Amala is right. Justice doesn't need hot blood. Tie him, and tomorrow we'll judge him by the village covenant." "Who agrees?" Hands rose together. The noise quieted, replaced by a heavy but safe silence. That night the whole village breathed easier. Anura slept peacefully in Amala's hut. Leela hugged her doll, and Kiran sat beside his mother, his eyes older by a few years. He whispered, "Mom, I see it now. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means keeping a person within the circle of justice, while keeping our hearts from turning to stone." Amala smiled and held him. "Yes, you've understood." Outside, the temple bell rang 3 times, echoing into the night. In that resonance, the village's suspicion, resentment, and fear seemed to fade a little. Dawn opened heavy the next morning. The village drum beat 3 times, calling everyone to the temple yard to try the kidnapper. The sky was dim gray, the wind dry, footsteps urgent. All of Nalika gathered, eyes burning with anger. In the center, the man caught the day before knelt with hands bound behind his back. His name was Varuna, a drifter who had once traveled with caravans, eyes shifty. Children huddled behind their parents, watching anxiously. Kieran stood by Amala, his hand clenched, worried for his mother and full of rage. Lila hugged her leaf doll, whispering, as if to soothe, "Don't be scared. Today there will be justice." Elder Sadayu stepped forward, his staff, striking 3 times. The sound cut through the seething air like a blade. His voice was deep. "Varuna, do you know your crime?" Varuna bowed his head, voice trembling. "I know. I took the child. I intended to sell him to the caravan for some grain, because my stomach was empty and my pockets were bare." Murmurs rose. Some shouted, others cursed. A burly man roared, "If you're hungry, ask. Why steal a human being? You deserve death." A mother screamed, "If it were my child, I'd kill you with my own hands." Sadayu raised a hand for silence. He looked at Amala, his voice warm. "You protected both the child and this man from being killed last night. Please speak." Amala stepped forward, calm, but resolute. "Yes, he committed a crime. Yes, he deserves punishment. But if we kill him, we turn his blood into our own. Forgiveness is not absolving the crime. It is refusing to breed more vengeance. Let him pay through labor, to rebuild something in this village with his own hands." The murmuring rose again. Some opposed, some nodded. Rahulya, the young monk, spoke out clearly. "If we kill a foolish man driven by hunger, we only kill a body. If we make him work, we may save the bit of conscience left. Compassion doesn't erase guilt, but it opens a door for someone to walk another path." The villager's eyes gradually softened. Elder Sadayu tapped his staff. "By the covenant, a first offense is not punished by death. Varuna will be tied and made to do public work for 3 days, carry water repair fences, patch the granary roof. After that, if he wants to stay, he must live under supervision. If he leaves, the village won't stop him, but he won't have a place at our table." "Who agrees consent?" rose across the yard. A storm of fury was released into fairness. Varuna lifted his head, eyes wet. "Never thought I'd be spared. I promise. I will work." The villagers didn't trust him yet, but at least they stopped shouting for his death. The next day, Varuna hauled bucket after bucket from the dwindling well, limping under the scorching sun. Sweat ran in streams, but no one helped, and no one beat him. Amala brought him a bowl of cool water, set it down without a word. Varuna looked up and nodded slightly, his eyes a mix of gratitude and shame. Kieran frowned at the sight. "Mom, why give him water? He tried to hurt my little brother." Amala put a hand on his shoulder. "See, precisely because he once tried to hurt him, he needs to see someone act differently. If all he gets is hatred, he'll live in hatred forever. If he receives a little water, he might feel his heart change." Kieran thought it over, not fully accepting it yet, but his eyes no longer burned. 3 days passed, and Varuna worked himself to exhaustion. He began to duck his head less and work quietly more. When the granary roof was patched, people saw him sitting alone in the yard watching the children play, eyes heavy but gentler. One afternoon, he quietly came before Amala and knelt. "I ask forgiveness. I'm not worthy of thanks, but without you, I'd have died under sticks. From now on, I won't take children anymore. I ask to work to repay." Amala nodded lightly. "Keep your word. Forgiveness doesn't erase guilt, but it opens a chance. Don't waste that chance." Meanwhile, little Anura gradually recovered. When fully awake, he hugged Amala and said weakly, "Mom, I thought I'd never come back." Amala wiped her tears and kissed his forehead. You're back. This is your home for as long as you want." The whole village watched hearts rinsed clean. Those who had accused Amala began to feel ashamed. Lyra, the one who criticized most, approached and gently placed her hand on Amala's eye. Was wrong to judge so quickly. "I used to laugh at the bowl of rice you gave. Now I understand." Amala held her hand, not blaming, only smiling. Everyone is afraid. When afraid, we easily err. Forgiveness is also for ourselves. In the days that followed, Nalika changed. People hung more bamboo chimes at the forest edge, learning from Valuna's story. Whenever arguments began, someone would ring a chime first, reminding both sides to lower their voices. Ravi, the firewood hauler, told people at the market, "We've seen it. If we'd followed anger that day, Varuna would be dead, and the ground soaked with blood. Now he patches the granary and carries water for us. That's the benefit of compassion." The villagers nodded. Compassion, once seen as weakness, had become the strength that kept the village calm. One moonlit night, the whole village gathered in the temple yard. Elder Sadayu stood in front, his voice warm and deep. "Remember, compassion isn't weak, and forgiveness isn't foolish. Compassion is the strength that keeps fear from ruling us. Forgiveness puts the past in its proper place, so the heart grows lighter." From the bowl of rice Amala gave to saving Anura, to how we dealt with Varuna, these have all taught us that. The bronze bell rang, echoing far. Children held hands, adults pressed their palms together, and the air softened. That night in the hut, Kiran asked his mother, "Mom, I understand now. But does forgiveness make everything stop hurting?" Amala stroked his head. "No. Forgiveness doesn't erase the wound. It turns the wound into a reminder instead of a cut that keeps bleeding. It lets you remember, but remember in order to live, not to die by inches." Kiran nodded, eyes bright, as if he had learned something big. The story seemed to end, but it left Nalika with a lasting change. People became less suspicious, less rash. That small bowl of rice became a large seed, sprouting into unity. Amala sat on the porch watching the moon shine through the thatch, her heart light as if it had never been otherwise. She knew tests weren't over. Life was long and hunger still waited, but now the village had learned one thing they could get through, with compassion and forgiveness. She whispered softly, "Rice runs out and returns. Water dries and rains again. But if hearts close, no season is enough. Compassion is the hidden spring that keeps this land alive." That morning the sky seemed washed clean after the night's rain. The smell of damp earth rode the wind. New grass pushed up through the cracks. Nalika woke with a different feeling. Lighter hearts fear a few steps farther away. In the temple yard, people gathered not to judge or quarrel, but to share the first meal after the rain. Their scant rice sacks were brought out and combined into a big pot of porridge. Each knew their portion wasn't much, but pooled together, the pot became enough for everyone. Amala carried a bowl to Kiran and Lila. They sat and ate, eyes shining. Kiran said quietly as he ate, "Mom, I've never tasted such delicious thin rice." Amala smiled. "It's not the rice that's delicious. People's hearts make it so." As the pot emptied, Elder Sadayu rose and struck his staff 3 times. The sound rang out, drawing every eye. "People of Nalika, we have endured a season of drought, hunger, and fear. But in suffering, we learned the most important thing. Compassion doesn't make us weak, and forgiveness doesn't make us lose. Compassion stops fear from ruling. Forgiveness puts the past in place so our hearts are lighter. He pointed toward Amala. The story of the mother who gave away her last bowl of rice taught the whole village. From a single grain, we have seen the power to sustain a community. And today, as we share this porridge, we know we still live because we still know how to open our hands. Applause rose, not loud, but firm. Lyra, who had criticized Amala the most, stepped forward with a small bag of new rice. Amala, I thought you were foolish. I was wrong. I offer this rice to you and your children. Please forgive me. Amala took her hand, voice gentle. I forgave long ago. I know that when people are hungry, they're easily afraid, and when afraid, easily mistaken. Forgiveness isn't because you need it, but because I need to keep my heart light. The two women looked at each other, tears falling without bitterness. In a corner of the yard, Varuna, the former kidnapper, quietly stacked the empty baskets. His face was sun-darkened, hair tangled, but his eyes were no longer shifty. Children ran around him, no longer afraid. A little boy handed him a piece of dry bread. Varuna took it awkward, then nodded thanks. Rahulya, the young monk, came over. Do you see what you receive today isn't rice? It's a chance. Keep it. Don't drop it. Varuna bowed his head and murmured, I'll never take children again. I want to stay to work and make amends. Rahulya placed a hand on his shoulder. If compassion can turn a poacher into a water carrier, this village is stronger than any fortress. That afternoon, Anura sat on the porch with Lila holding the leaf doll. He whispered, From now on, this will be our doll. Lila smiled, eyes innocent. Children forget fear faster than adults. That very fact made the grown-ups feel they needed to relearn clarity. Kiran, sitting beside his mother, suddenly asked Mom, I see that forgiveness is good, but can forgiveness ever make people take advantage? Amala looked at him, eyes kind, but keen. Forgiveness isn't letting things slide. Forgiveness gives a chance, but chance comes with responsibility. Like Varuna, he spared, but he must work. Forgiveness doesn't feed bad habits. It nourishes the ability to change. Kiran nodded as if he had found a missing piece in life's large puzzle. Night fell, the moon bright enough to light the whole village. People gathered around a fire in the temple yard, warming themselves and retelling the story. One voice followed another. Each person added a detail, a feeling. An old man clicked his tongue. I'm over 60 and used to think compassion was for the weak. Now I see it's what keeps blood off our ground. Without Amala, this land might be red today. A young man chimed in. I once wanted to beat Varuna to death. Seeing him carry water now, my hands feel lighter for not being stained with blood. Maybe forgiveness is how we keep ourselves from becoming cruel. Voices of agreement rose. When the fire died down, Elder Sadeu stood to conclude. The story of the bowl of rice has closed, but its lesson remains. Remember, each of us has a hungry tiger of anger and a hungry belly of selfishness. If we feed them hatred, they'll tear us apart. If we feed them compassion, they'll retreat. And like the bamboo chime, before you speak another hot word, pause a beat, so the heart can speak. He struck his staff. The sound rang into the night, blending with the insects, forming a peaceful melody. After that gathering, Nalika changed. People began sharing rice and digging irrigation ditches together. Bamboo chimes hung everywhere at the temple yard, the market gate, and even outside Amala's hut. Whenever conflict arose, someone rang a chime to call everyone back to their breath. Anura was treated as the village's child. Children played with him, Adults cared for him. But in his heart, Amala was always his second mother, the mother of the last bowl of rice. Amala didn't want to be a symbol. She only wanted to teach her children live, not just to keep what you have, but to nourish who you are. And she believed that was the only way humans would not die slowly of fear. The mother of the last bowl of rice leaves a piercing lesson. Compassion isn't softness, and certainly not blindness. People often mistake compassion for yielding until you're trampled, or forgiveness as an excuse for others to repeat their wrongs. The truth is the opposite. Compassion is strength, the power that keeps fear and hatred from controlling us. It's the courage of a heart that knows what to hold and what to let go, that faces suffering without being swallowed by it. Forgiveness is the same. It doesn't mean forgetting or wiping clean what once hurt us. Forgiveness means putting the past in its proper place, like a stone set by the roadside. You still remember how it once hurt your foot, but you no longer carry it on your back. Forgiveness lightens the heart, not so someone else can rest easy, but so you can walk farther, live wider, and love deeper. In life, there are times we're hungry, in the belly, hungry for food, for material sufficiency. But there are also times we're hungry, in the heart, hungry for understanding, for an embrace, for a gaze without judgment. When the belly is hungry, we need a bowl of rice. When the heart is hungry, we need an outstretched hand. Rice feeds the body, the hand feeds the soul. Only when we learn to open our hand, even if only the last bowl remains, do we understand what enough means. Enough isn't when the jar is full or the purse is heavy. Enough is when the heart is no longer barren. The mother in this story, by sharing her scant bowl of rice, sowed a great seed in her children, and the whole hamlet, the seed of inner abundance. Once sown, that seed sprouts into shade trees, into trust people can lean on through hardship. If life were only a struggle to hold on to each grain, we'd live forever in anxiety and fear. But when we dare to share, we realize life doesn't exist only in the bowl of rice, but in how we see one another and how we touch one another with kindness. In that moment, we are no longer poor. We become the richest of all rich in peace. So the lesson of this story is open your hand, even if it holds only the last bowl of rice. Because sometimes one small bowl can save a life, and one act of compassion can save an entire lifetime. The story of the Buddha, saving a sparrow. On a spring morning in the village of Kusalya, when dew still clung to the grass, and the sky was as clear as a freshly washed mirror, everyone was already bustling. The thud of pestles, pounding rice, children's chirping as they ran around the lowing of cattle from the edge of the village. This season, the villagers were preparing to sow seeds, hoping for a lush harvest after months of drought. Along the dirt road leading into the village, a group of monks in saffron robes walked unhurriedly. Leading them was the Buddha, his bearing calm each step, light yet steady. Beside him were close disciples, including Venerable Ananda and several young novices. When the villagers saw the group pass, they pressed their palms together in greeting. Some offered water, others placed ripe fruit into the alms bowls. Under the eaves of a thatched house, a boy named Sona, about 10 years old, sat stripping bits of straw to make a nest for the chicks. Suddenly, he heard faint chirping from a nearby bush. Coming closer, Sona found a fledgling sparrow that had fallen from its nest wings not yet strong body trembling on the ground. Its mother circled above, crying anxiously, but didn't dare swoop down because a cat was lurking nearby. Sona picked up the bird, but he was too young to know what to do. Just then, the Buddha's group happened to pass by. Sona ran over holding up the sparrow and called out loudly, "World-honored one, please help. This little bird is about to die." The Buddha stopped. He stepped forward, his gentle eyes resting on the tiny living being. He carefully received the sparrow, his warm hand lifting it, as one would a fragile drop of dew. The little bird gradually calmed its faint cries, softening. Ananda asked, "World-honored one, for a life so small, is such great concern really necessary?" The Buddha smiled and replied, "Ananda, every life is precious. A bird's wing, a drop of water, a blade of grass, all are threads in the web of life. If we belittle the small, we'll easily belittle the great. If we learn to cherish a little bird, we'll know how to cherish the whole world." The villagers gathered around, listening in silence. Sona hesitated and asked, "But Lord, a tiny sparrow like this, if it happens to die, won't change anything, will it?" The Buddha looked straight into the boy's eyes. "You're right, that the death of a sparrow won't alter the seasons or the heavens, but it can change your heart. Compassion doesn't wait for big deeds. It begins with the smallest. A heart that bends down to lift up a tiny life is a heart that can look upon all humanity with kindness." Hearing this, the villagers murmured, some moved, some contemplative. The Buddha placed the sparrow into Sona's hands and instructed, "Hold it against your chest so your warmth can pass to it. Remember to save a life you don't need power, only a willing heart." The little bird nestled in Sona's hands, its eyes half closed, its breathing growing steadier. That evening, the whole village gathered in the temple yard to hear a Dharma talk. Moonlight spread like a silver cloth across the ground. The Buddha sat beneath a Bodhi tree, surrounded by hundreds of villagers and monks. At the center of the circle, the sparrow still lay in Sona's hands, becoming the focus of the teaching. The Buddha began slowly. People often think themselves above all creatures, but in truth we are only part of the stream of life. Like this sparrow, we are weak when newly born and need protection. Compassion is the bridge that connects all beings. Forgiveness is the water that washes away hatred. When these two meet, the world can be still. An elderly villager asked, "World-honored one, compassion toward people is already difficult, let alone toward animals. How can we practice it?" The Buddha replied, "Compassion makes no distinctions. It doesn't ask human or animal, rich or poor, great or small. It asks only, do you suffer? If so, then we share. Begin with small things, picking up a fallen chick, watering a withered tree, ladling water for the thirsty. That is the path into great compassion." The yard fell utterly silent, with only the insect's long hum remaining. After that, the story of the sparrow spread throughout Kusalya. People retold it with reverence. The Buddha bent down to save a little bird and taught that compassion begins with the smallest things. From then on, village children no longer dared throw stones at birds or destroy nests. Adults grew less harsh when encountering wild creatures. But some also said, if we keep fussing over sparrows, who will handle the big matters, the harvest hunger debts? What can a tiny bird help with? Those words planted a seed of doubt, and that very seed would lead to a later turning where the lesson of compassion and forgiveness would be tested to the utmost. After the full moon night in Kusalya, the story of the Buddha stooping to pick up the sparrow became a topic everywhere. Some admired it as proof that compassion knows no bounds. Others doubted it, saying that caring for tiny lives only wastes time and energy that should be devoted to big things. The next morning at the village market, debate buzzed. A gray-bearded farmer named Jinaka said loudly to his friends, "What's so precious about sparrows? They even eat the young rice. If everyone protects them, what will we eat?" A young woman, Mira, immediately objected. But Venerable Ananda said the Buddha taught that every life is precious, small or large. All deserve care. Jinaka shook his head. "Fine words, but do they fill empty stomachs? We sow and flocks of sparrows come to peck everything. We might forgive one bird, but what about hundreds?" The crowd fell quiet. The question made many hesitate. At one corner, Sona cradled the basket holding the sparrow the Buddha had saved. He heard everything and looked briefly saddened. Last night his hands had trembled with joy, receiving the bird from a world-honored one. But now that joy was shrouded by doubt, would keeping a fledgling make the adults angrier? That afternoon, the villagers gathered again under the Bodhi tree. Sona timidly brought the basket before the Buddha and asked, "World-honored one, people say sparrows will eat the young rice and harm the harvest. Was I wrong to keep it?" The Buddha looked at Sona kindly, then turned to the crowd. "Who among you has never caused harm once? Children snap branches, adults step on seedlings, or in anger speak words that wound others. If out of fear of harm, we were to cast everything out, who would be left in this world?" He paused, then said slowly, "A sparrow pecking a few grains of rice. That is its nature. But a person who nurtures hatred in the heart causes a loss 100 times greater. I saved a bird, not so it would become a destroyer of harvests, but so that we might learn to keep our minds from turning into fields of weeds." The listeners grew still. Those words pierced the veil of doubt. But the real trial came. That year the monsoon arrived late. Fields cracked. Seedlings withered. Rice was scarce. Many husks were empty. Tensions rose as food ran short. One afternoon, when flocks of sparrows descended on the fields to eat the remaining grains, the villagers were enraged. They grabbed sticks and threw stones to drive them off. Jinaka shouted, "See, this is the result of indulgence. Sparrows aren't grateful. They only know how to eat." The crowd joined in, ready to surround and kill. Just then, Sona ran out and raised his hands. "Please stop. The world-honored one taught that every life is precious. We can't forget that just because of one hard season." Angry shouts rose. "You're a naive boy. If we don't protect the rice, the whole village will starve." The situation grew tense. One more stone, and the flock would be slaughtered. Rumor reached the Buddha. He and his disciples went out to the fields. Seeing the villagers in anger, he sat down in the middle of the field, quiet as a lake. Everyone fell silent, waiting for him to speak. The Buddha looked at the birds and then at the people. "You wish to protect the rice that fear is real. But killing birds won't make the rains come sooner, nor make the earth yield more grain. Killing only burdens the heart. Instead of killing, why not learn to live together?" A young man asked. "But how can we live together when they eat our rice?" The Buddha pointed toward the bamboo grove. "Sow a few spare seeds along the forest edge. Make a separate plot for the birds. When they are fed, they won't ravage your main fields." The villagers murmured, The idea sounded new, and many were skeptical. Janaka snorted. "You're telling us to sow extra seed to feed those birds. That's just whittling down our own share." The Buddha said gently, "Sometimes by losing a small part, you keep the greater whole. If you try to keep everything and give birth to resentment, you may end up with nothing. If you share, your heart rests easy, and heaven and earth are more likely to open to you." He looked up at the sky and said slowly, "The rains will come as hearts learn to open." Don't let hatred dry this land further. A group agreed to try. They sowed some spare grain at the forest edge away from the main fields. The sparrows flocked there to eat, grew full, and gradually came less often to the rice. Sona rejoiced, hugging the basket his sparrow now recovered. World-honored one, so living together isn't a vague dream. It can be real. The Buddha nodded. Compassion is not a slogan, it is action. Forgiveness is not just letting go, it is finding a way to coexist. The villagers began to see results. Though they lost a few spare seeds, they preserved more of their main crop. More importantly, tempers cooled. They started to see sparrows not only as pests, but as beings who will be content if given a share. But trouble hadn't ended. The initial compromise pleased many, but it seeded deeper resentment in Janaka. He muttered, "Share once and fine, but if we do this every year, we'll get used to losing." Compassion can turn into weakness. Those words were like embers under ash, ready to flare into a new blaze, one that would test not only Kusalya, but also the teachings on compassion and forgiveness. In the days after the villagers sowed spare grain at the forest edge for the sparrows, the main fields did suffer less damage. Some sighed with relief, taking it as proof of the Buddha's teaching. But not everyone was satisfied. In a corner of the village, old farmer Janaka grew ever more resentful. He had lived off his fields and endured many failed harvests, so the idea of compassion toward animals made him uneasy. One evening, sitting with a few men, his voice rasped, "Don't you see? We sweat into the soil and still have to feed the birds of the sky. Today, a few seeds, tomorrow they'll demand more. One day our children will go hungry while the birds feast." A young man scratched his head. "But sir, our main fields are better protected than before. Maybe this solution isn't so bad." Janaka slammed the table. "You're too naive. Sparrows breed quickly. They'll eat at the forest edge and soon bring more flocks. How will we cope then? The Buddha only talks theory. Compassion sounds nice, but empty stomachs don't listen to reason." His words planted more doubt. A few began to nod, though they didn't dare speak up. The next month, the sky stayed dry. A hot wind blew through yellowing many plots. The seeds sown for the birds at the forest edge shriveled of little use. Hungry sparrows returned to the main fields. At dawn, the villagers saw black waves of birds pecking at the few remaining heads of rice. Panic spread. People rushed out shouting and throwing stones to no avail. Janaka seized the moment, shouting, "See, I warned you. They know nothing but their bellies. This is where blind indulgence leads." A woman burst into tears, clutching her thin child. "If we lose this harvest, too, how will we feed our children?" The crowd boiled. Eyes that once admired the rescue of a bird turned doubtful. A group marched to the temple yard to demand an audience with the Buddha. That afternoon, under the Bodhi tree, the villagers assembled, faces tight with worry. Janaka stepped forward and pointed. "World-honored one, you told us to share seed with the birds. But in this drought, they still ravage our rice. You said compassion calms hearts, yet our hearts are more anxious. You said forgiveness preserves life, but we see only more loss. Answer us, can compassion truly fill empty stomachs? The air grew heavy. Some looked to the Buddha for help. Others eyed him with suspicion, even anger. The Buddha was quiet eyes on the crowd, as if looking into a river in flood. He spoke slowly. Janaka, you're right about one thing. Empty stomachs need food, not words alone. But if because of hunger you kill all the birds, will your heart truly be full, or only full for a moment, and then empty again? With hatred, Janaka protested. But if we don't kill them, the whole village will starve. The Buddha replied, no. Fear will destroy this village before hunger does. You think killing birds saves people, but it only sows more hatred. When hearts are full of hate, people will turn and harm people themselves. The crowd fell silent, but Janaka wouldn't let up. If compassion is truly strong, please show us. Save the rice fields or the villagers will no longer listen to you. A challenge was laid down. The whole village waited, the air taut like a tightened string. Just then, the boy Sona stepped forward, holding the sparrow he had cared for since the day the Buddha saved it. The bird had grown. Its wings were strong enough to fly a few yards. Sona knelt before the Buddha, world-honored one. I believe your words, but how can everyone else believe too? I'm afraid this little bird will be swallowed by people's anger. The Buddha placed his hand on the boy's head and smiled. Sona, you are the answer. You raised it with love, and it lived. Adults see only the rice that's gone, but you see the life that was preserved. Let it fly, so the villagers can see compassion, can set free. It doesn't only bind. Sona hesitated. Then he opened his hand. The sparrow spread its wings and soared into the sky. The crowd all looked up. For a moment it was silent, as if everyone were sharing one breath. The little bird alighted on a nearby branch and sang. Its song couldn't banish the fear of empty stomachs, but it touched something deeper in people's hearts, a fragile belief that life still held hope. Moved as they were not, everyone was convinced. Afterward, Janaka gathered a small group aside and whispered, "We can't sit around waiting for sparrows to sing. If we want to live, we have to save ourselves. Tonight we'll go to the fields and cast nets to catch them all. Even if people say we disrespect the Buddha, at least our children won't starve." Some hesitated, but fear of hunger made them nod. News reached Sona. He ran to tell Ananda, who informed the Buddha. The Buddha was quiet for a moment, then said, "Tonight we'll go to the fields as well. Let the villagers choose. Compassion only has meaning when it is tested." That night the moon was dim. In the fields, Janaka and his group spread out their nets. They worked with trembling hands, knowing they were going against the Buddha's teaching. But hunger had pushed them to the limit. Just as they were about to tighten the nets, the Buddha appeared, with Ananda and several monks. He didn't speak loudly. He simply stepped into the middle of the field and sat down. Moonlight draped his figure like a still mountain. He looked at Janaka and said, in a low voice, "You can kill this flock of birds, but when the net tightens, you'll also tighten your own heart. You think you're saving your children, but you're only planting in them the seed of hatred. They will grow up learning to solve things by killing, and in the end, they will harm each other." The crowd was utterly silent. Wind swept across the fields and the rice leaves trembled. The sparrows on the branches were quiet too, as if awaiting judgment. Janaka trembled. He gripped the net rope tightly, sweat pouring down. In his mind, the image of his thin, crying child mixed with the Buddha's words. On one side was the instinct to survive. On the other, the call of compassion. At last he let go of the rope. The net fell to the ground. Janaka collapsed to his knees, tears streaming. World-honored one. I am so afraid. I'm afraid of losing my child, my harvest, everything. But seeing you sit here, I feel more afraid of hatred. Please show us the way. The Buddha smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. You've already seen it. Forgiveness isn't starving yourself. It's stopping the starvation of your heart. Find a way to live together. When hearts open, heaven and earth open too. The sparrows suddenly burst into song, like a hymn of release. The whole field glowed faintly under the moon, blended with the birds' voices, and the villagers shivered as if a storm had just passed through their hearts. That night, not a single bird was killed. The villagers went home with worries still heavy, but lighter hearts. They knew the real battle wasn't with the birds. It was with the fear and anger inside themselves. Janaka sat dazed at the field's edge, whispering, I almost killed the whole village with my own hands. From now on, I'll try to live with compassion, even if my stomach is still empty. The Buddha stood and gazed at the vast sky, his voice like the wind. Compassion becomes truly great only when tested by suffering. Forgiveness is truly strong only when you have the power to take revenge and still choose to let go. The morning after that tense night in the fields, Kausalya wore a new face. No one spoke loudly. People looked at one another with a mixture of embarrassment and relief. They hadn't killed the sparrows, but the fear of hunger still hung over every roof. Janaka, the one who had led the move to kill the birds, went to the well and saw Sona feeding the young sparrow. He walked slowly over and said in a hoarse voice, Boy, I was wrong to try to tighten the net. When I saw the master sitting in the middle of the field, my hands shook, not from fear of the birds, but from fear of my own heart. Maybe I've let my belly lead me for too long. Sona looked up, eyes bright. Sir, the world-honored one teaches that everyone fears hunger. But compassion doesn't deny hunger. It keeps hunger from becoming hatred. Janaka sighed and set his hand on the boy's shoulder. I'm old, but last night I learned from a child. That afternoon the villagers gathered again under the Bodhi tree. The Buddha sat still, eyes half closed, breath like a passing breeze. When everyone had assembled, he opened his eyes and spoke clearly. You have seen how hatred waits for its chance to turn into spilled blood. Last night, if the net had tightened, not only birds would have died, our village bonds would have died too. Compassion saved a flock of birds, and it also saved the village from division. A man spoke up, but Lord, our stomachs are still empty. Can compassion protect the rice fields? The Buddha nodded. Compassion won't make the rain fall at once, but it keeps hearts from turning to stone. When hearts are open, wisdom finds a way. Work together instead of letting fear divide you. He proposed set aside a small plot and sow leftover grain, not for people, but for the birds. Let them feed there so your main fields remain safe, and dig a channel to bring water from the distant stream. Work together and share together. When you share, you aren't poorer, you're richer in trust. Those words fell into people's hearts like the first drops of rain. The next day, the villagers of Kusalya began digging the canal. Men dug, women carried mud, children picked stones. The clink of hoes and shovels blended with laughter so different from the anger before. Jinaka, once the fiercest opponent, stripped off his shirt, waded into the trench, and swung his hoe. Sweat streamed down as he looked up and saw Rahulya, a young monk also bent under a load of earth. Jinaka was moved. I wanted to oppose you before, but now you're carrying dirt with us. I'm ashamed and grateful. Rahulya smiled. We're all learning. You learn to dig channels. I learn from the people's hearts. That's how we go together. At the forest edge, a group sowed leftover grain for the sparrows. The birds flocked and chirped. Children ran after them, not throwing stones anymore, but pointing and laughing. A little girl shouted, "They're eating their own patch, not our rice." The adults watched, feeling lighter. Days passed, and the canal neared completion. One afternoon, as the villagers poured the first buckets of water into the fields, the wind shifted. Dark clouds gathered. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Then the rain poured down, soaking the cracked fields. Cheers rang through the village. The elderly knelt. Children danced in the rain. Jinaka lifted his face, rain mingling with tears. Is this the earth's answer to compassion? The Buddha stood under the temple eaves, his robe wet with rain, his gaze serene. He spoke softly, yet all could hear. The rain does not distinguish between field and forest, person and bird. Compassion is the same. When hearts open, the heavens align. After the rain, the fields turned green again. Sparrows fed at the forest's edge, rarely ventured into the main paddies. The villagers looked at one another, and smiles began to replace suspicion. One evening, Jinaka visited Sona, carrying a bundle of young rice boy. I want to give this to the sparrow you raised. Thanks to it, I learned the greatest lesson of my life. Forgiveness doesn't make me lose it, lets me keep. From now on, I'll teach my grandchildren not to throw stones at birds. Sona hugged the bundle, eyes shining. Thank you, sir. I believe the sparrow will sing for the whole village. Right then, the sparrow circled above its song, ringing like an anthem of freedom. The next day, the villagers gathered to ask the Buddha for a final word. He sat beneath the Bodhi tree, the full moon bright, his voice resounding. You have seen that compassion is not weakness. It is the strength that keeps fear from ruling you. Forgiveness does not erase the past. It puts the past in its proper place so the heart is lighter. Because you forgave, you did not kill the birds. Because you had compassion, you dug the canal together. And because of that, the rain came, and the fields revived. He lifted his hand toward the starry sky. Every living being is a star. When we cherish each small light, the whole sky shines. Remember, sometimes a tiny sparrow's wing can save an entire village. The villagers bowed as one. Their worries remained, but their faith had grown larger than their fear. After the first seasonal rains, Kusalya's fields slowly recovered. Plots that had cracked now lay green, with young shoots promising a harvest, no longer haunted by famine. Sparrows chattered at the forest edge and rarely strayed into the main fields. People watched the rice grow evenly. Their hearts lightened, as if setting down a heavy basket after a long trek. Children played in the rain and no longer threw stones at birds. Adults worked the fields, sometimes glancing up at flocks passing overhead, their eyes no longer angry, but touched with forbearance. Sona, the boy who had cradled the fledgling from the first day, still cared for it. The bird had grown stronger, often circling the temple courtyard, before returning to perch on his shoulder. People called it the sparrow of compassion. On a bright moonlit night, the village gathered in the temple yard to give thanks. They brought flowers, fruit, and bundles of young rice. Elder Sadayu spoke. We nearly let anger lead us ready to kill the sparrows, out of fear of hunger. But thanks to the world-honored one, we learned that compassion doesn't make us weak. It keeps us from becoming killers. Forgiveness isn't ignoring wrongdoing. It keeps the past from weighing down the heart. The villagers bowed together. That silent sound echoed louder than drums and gongs. The Buddha sat on a stone beneath the Bodhi tree moonlight on his saffron robe. He looked at the villagers, his voice low yet clear. You have seen when anger leads, the net will tighten, and not only the birds die, but human hearts die with them. When forgiveness leads, the net is released, and not only the birds live, but community lives. Compassion and forgiveness are a pair of wings. One keeps you from falling into hatred. The other lifts you beyond fear. He paused, pointing to the starry sky. Every life is a star. When we scorn even one small light, the sky grows dark. When we cherish even the smallest light, the sky blazes bright. Listeners wept. They no longer saw just sparrows, they saw themselves in them, frail, in need of protection, yet able to soar when loved. Before the crowd, Jinaka, the man who had wanted to tighten the nets, stood. With palms together, he spoke hoarsely, world-honored one. I once thought compassion was cowardice. I once gripped the net rope ready to kill the flock. But seeing you sitting in the field, your eyes gentle instead of angry, I trembled and let go. Now I understand fear is the chain. Forgiveness is the release. He turned to the villagers. I will teach my descendants never to throw stones at birds again. I learned this lesson with my whole life. Applause rose, blending with the sparrow's song atop the temple roof. The children of Kusalya changed the fastest. They made little bird fields at the village edge, sowing leftover grains and calling it our small friend's portion. Each morning, they went to watch the birds feed, not as pests, but as fellow beings. A little girl asked her mother, Mom, why do we feed the sparrows? Her mother hugged her and replied, because if you can share with what's small, you'll have a heart for what's big later on. Compassion begins with leftover grains. Those simple words drifted across the temple yard, making many smile. When it came time to leave Kusalya, the villagers escorted the monks to the village gate. Everyone brought small gifts, fruit, cloth, flowers. Sona offered the Buddha the sparrow he had raised. His hands trembled. World-honored one, I want to give it to you. Because of you, I learned to love it. Now I want it to fly free, not just for me, but for the whole village. The Buddha patted the boy's head and opened his hand. The sparrow took wing, soaring into the clear sky, and vanished into the light. He said, You understand, love is not keeping it, is giving. So it is with forgiveness. When you let go, your heart is light, and you will fly far. Before departing, the Buddha left a final message. My children, compassion won't make rice spring from the ground, but it keeps your hearts from turning to stone. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it puts the past in its proper place, so your heart is light and your steps can go far. In each of you lives a fragile sparrow, your fear, your anger, your resentment. If you kill it with hatred, you will lose yourself. If you nourish it with compassion, it will fly and take you with it. The villagers were speechless. They understood the story was not only about sparrows, it was about their own lives. After the group of monks had gone far, a poor old woman remained in the temple courtyard. She sat by the eaves holding a tiny oil flask in her hands with only a few drops left. Her eyes were sunken, but gently bright. She whispered, "If even a little sparrow has value, then this little lamp deserves to be lit too, doesn't it?" She brought the oil flask and offered it to the Buddha statue in the temple. The light from the small lamp flickered, yet it illuminated the entire dark hall. A new story was beginning, and people would call it The Old Woman and the Oil Flask. The Story of the Old Woman and the Oil Flask. Dawn poured over the little hamlet of Vanasiri, with a light as clear as spring water at its source. The thatched roofs were speckled with dew. The sound of pestles pounding rice was sparse, and the red dirt road stretched all the way to the gate of the Bodhi temple on the low hill. People said the temple had once been where the Buddha stopped to give a short teaching on the lamp in the heart. Ever since, travelers would stop by to light candles every full moon. As a reminder, even a small light is enough to push back the dark if we're willing to strike the flame. At the far edge of the hamlet stood a crooked hut. Its owner was an old woman named Jivika. Hair, white as ash, back bent, but eyes bright like 2 drops of oil left in the bottom of a lamp. She had been a weaver. Her husband had died years ago in a bout of swamp fever, and her only son had left with a caravan and never sent word again. She lived alone, selling a few mats woven from coarse jute in exchange for a little rice and salt. Her most precious belonging was a small oil flask, its mouth chipped, its body blackened with smoke, with only enough left to soak the wick a few more times. This morning she sat on the porch, placing the oil flask in her thin palms, listening to the dry wick rub as she turned it gently. The neighbor boy, 12-year-old Nanda hair, tousled eyes jet black, came running up. "Grandma, I heard Venerable Ananda and some monks are coming to our temple this afternoon. The villagers are planning a big lighting. Are you going?" Old Jivika smiled a smile etched with the gentleness of a long life. "Yes, I still have my oil flask. I only fear it's too little. My lamp may not shine much." "A little is still light," Grandma Nanda said, firm as a nail, then lowered his voice. "But they say your small lamp in the main hall would be an embarrassment. They're collecting sesame oil and cottonseed oil big jars." She looked at the boy eyes without reproach. "Nanda, a hungry meal is still worth eating. We don't stop chewing millet just because the neighbor eats plain rice. Light isn't for comparing. It's for driving the darkness away." Nanda nodded without fully understanding, but it was the nod of a seed-hearing rain. No leaves yet, but the roots had stirred. By noon, Gata Market was busier than usual. Jars of oil were lined up along the eaves, human shapes flickering on the silky surface. Lyra, the potter's wife, sold oil in a blouse, bright as turmeric. Her voice was loud, her hands sharp like a bamboo whittling knife. Seeing Jivika carrying her chipped flask, she clicked her tongue. "Old Jivika, how many drops are left in that flask? Fine for lighting your house, but not the main hall. Don't disgrace Vanasiri. Other people's lamps shine like the full moon. Yours flickers like a firefly." Jivika tilted the flask, listening to the thin liquid shift. "Fireflies still lead people across the field's edge, Lady Lyra. Honestly, you're old and you talk like a verse." Lyra sneered. "Tell you what, trade that oil flask for 2 bowls of my rice. Tonight just stand outside and watch for fun, no need to be jostled inside." Nanda stood beside her, gripping Jivika's hem. The old woman looked at the boy, then at the flask. 2 bowls of rice was a gentle invitation to an empty stomach. But she pressed the flask to her chest. "I'll keep it. This lamp is a promise I light for the one who's gone, and for myself as well." "What promise can you keep when the oil's gone?" Lyra folded her arms. "A person needs to live within their means." "I know," Jivika smiled softly, "but you also have to feed the right mouth. A person's mouth isn't only the stomach." The oil buyers burst out laughing, unsure whether at the old woman or her twisty words. Nanda pouted, but Jivika set a hand on the boy's shoulder and led him away. The noon wind smelled of burned old straw, mixed with the warm scent of sesame oil, like time itself, patting one's head. Evening fell over the Bodhi temple. The courtyard was like a sky-blue lake, reflecting the sun's last glow. Venerable Ananda and several young monks set a simple Dharma seat under the Bodhi tree. Villagers brought lamps to place along the eaves. There were gilded lamps, bronze lamps, and fresh clay lamps just out of the kiln. Big lamps and small lamps, arranged in layers, like stars descending to earth. Jivika stood at the edge of the yard holding the chipped oil flask in open hands. She glanced at the ornate lamps and hesitated. Nanda looked at her, breathing as if guarding a flame. "Go on," in Grandma. Light doesn't ask which house owns the container. The old woman walked slowly. Lyra was already there, commanding the lamp bearers. Seeing Jivika, she arched an eyebrow. "Old woman, the innermost area is for the great offering lamps of the village assembly. Small lamps should be placed by the porch." Her voice rang out, drowning the evening bell. People glanced at the chipped flask. Some snickered, some shook their heads. Poor thing. At that moment, a young monk, Rahulya, a student of Venerable Ananda, stepped forward with palms together. "Lay donor, allow me to carry it for you." Lyra let out a light, mocking snort. "Venerable, you're too courteous. That lamp will go out no matter where it's placed." Rahulya didn't reply. He took the oil flask and walked with Jivika straight into the main hall. A few started to block them, but Ananda looked over from afar and gave a slight nod. That nod was like a wind changing direction hands that were about to be raised suddenly, lowered. The main hall smelled of incense, the day's last light fading into the tiles. The Buddha's statue sat serene, eyes closed, as if embracing the world's breath. Jivika knelt and set the flask before the statue. From her sleeve, she drew a small wick she had spun herself and set it in the lamp's mouth. Rahulya lit it. The flame caught the wick like a thirsty fish gulping the first rain of the season. Light. Her lamp wasn't large. It stood there modest as a small hello. Yet strangely, its light held steady, not trembling with the draft. Lyra muttered something and turned to direct other lamps. Jivika's eyes looked young again. "What do you pray for?" Rahulya asked softly. "I pray to get through the night," Jivika said. "Not this temple's night, my night. Every night passes. Some nights pass on their own. Some must be led through." Rahulya bowed his head. The old woman's words fell like a dry leaf light, yet clearly heard as it touched the ground. Dusk poured down like a layer of lacquered amber. Bells and drums welcomed the Dharma, and Venerable Ananda began a short talk. He told of a lamp lit in Rajagaha long ago, amid crowded streets, amid a jostling world. Some light lamps to show off the lamp, he said, and some light them to see the road. Nanda leaned against the old woman's knee, listening to the warm, low cadence playing, with little ornament many streaks of light. Outside, the wind shifted big, and small lamps quivered. Lyra's lamp shook and belched black smoke from a thick wick, and oil poured too full. Jivika's lamp held steady like an elder, husbanding each breath. When the talk paused, villagers lined up to dedicate merit. Clouds billowed over, and a strong wind rose. A whirling gust rushed across the porch and snuffed out rows of lamps at once. Cries of "oh no" erupted. Lyra hurried to shield her lamp, but its flame wriggled and died. Panic spread, feet bumping, feet, shoulders jostling shoulders. Amid the chaos, one point of light stood calm in the main hall, Jivika's lamp. It stood like a small spine, keeping the night from breaking. The invisible hand of the wind seemed to touch it, and then pull back, as if respecting something hard to name. "How strange," someone exclaimed. "What kind of wick lasts like that?" Another marveled. Lyra's lips tightened as her eyes darted. Nanda looked up and whispered, "Grandma." Jivika placed her hand on his head, as if giving him a private blessing of peace. Ananda gazed at that lamp for a long time. Then he continued without raising his voice. "A lamp doesn't ask how many beats the wind will blow. It only lives its duty of oil and wick. Compassion is the same. It doesn't show off. It just does its work, casting enough light for one step, so people don't tread on each other." The teaching was soft as a cloth, wiping away a bit of triumph, still stuck on the foreheads of those who loved big lamps. Night deepened. Lamps were relit, but by the second watch the wind shifted and a fine rain slanted through the eaves. People rushed to carry lamps inside. Wet lamps went out one after another. By the third watch, most flames had died. Only a few faint glows remained. And right before the statue, the chipped lamp stayed calm, burning like an old night watchman who never sleeps. Jivika sat by a pillar, eyes closed, fingers on a rough black Bodhi rosary. Inside her, another night was struggling to pass, the night of missing her child, the night of hungry meals, the night of bitter words. She didn't pray for wealth or her son's return, only that the night not scar her heart. Rahulya poured hot tea for her. "Are you tired? Old folks are used to the night. I only fear the lamp will run out of breath before dawn. I see you have very little oil. Little burns slow, small wick, low flame. Enough." She smiled. "Whether the poor are noisy or the rich are quiet, doesn't matter. What matters is not going out." A group of young men nearby nodded. They had just fussed over the village hall's lamp dumping in oil, using a thick wick flaring bright, dying from greed. That small light, meanwhile, stayed calm and steady. Near dawn, the rain stopped and the wind moved on. The nightbird's song shifted to a livelier rhythm, sparrows announcing sunrise like a tiny brass band. The temple gates opened. A few elders came in, ready to relight the morning lamps. They froze when they saw the main hall, still bright from a single lamp. They bent down to read the faint carving on the chipped flask, "Jivika, a lamp for the one who has gone." One old woman whispered, "Her husband." Another said, "Perhaps her son." The news drifted along the columns like a warm breeze. Venerable Ananda stepped in, bowed to the Buddha, then turned to the old woman. "Jivika, your lamp kept the night from going out." She opened her eyes and smiled. Master, every night passes when people don't abandon the lamp. Nanda blurted, "You're a miracle." No, Nanda. Jivika shook her head just the right way. Small wick, little oil, and letting the wind pass. What we need to learn isn't miracles, but skill and heart. Lyra stood at the porch face, flushed, whether from cold or chagrin, no one knew. She looked at the chipped lamp, then at her hands, her nails still stained black from a half-burned wick. A sigh touched the air. Ananda spoke to everyone in a plain, direct style. There are two reasons a lamp lasts the night: technique and heart. Technique is the right-sized wick, enough oil, and a proper windscreen. Heart is not showing off, not splashing, knowing how to give the wind a way through. Darkness will remain in each of us. But if every home keeps one small lamp, the village won't be dark. Listeners murmured softly, as if something hard to name had suddenly found a name. The sun edged up. The temple yard glittered with raindrops clinging to the Bodhi leaves. The chipped lamp's flame was now thin, the oil near the bottom. Jivika lifted the flask, raised it before the statue, and bowed deeply. "Thank you for the night." She turned to go. Lyra stood there holding a tray of extinguished bronze lamps. Their eyes met. Lyra hesitated. "Jivika, did I go too far last night?" Jivika shook her head slightly. Heavy words should be put down. Carrying them tires the arms. Lyra bit her lip, then suddenly said, "Let me learn your wick." Nanda's eyes went wide. Jivika smiled, took a spare wick from her sleeve and handed it to Lyra. "This wick sips oil slowly and doesn't bloat the flame. But the main thing is, don't show off your lamp. The moment you show off, the wind knows exactly where to blow." All three laughed, clear as a drop of light falling into a cup. As people dispersed, Jivika took her flask back to the hut. Nanda walked beside her and asked, "Grandma, this oil will run out. After that, how will you get through the night? Then I'll light another lamp. If there's no oil, I'll light my heart. If there's no wick, I'll light my breath. If there's nothing at all, I'll sit still and let dawn come on its own." Sitting still is also lighting, yes. She winked. Stillness is a lamp that doesn't flicker. On the dirt road, birds called to each other in lively phrases. The old woman and the boy passed as two small shadows, but before them the morning stretched out in an endless, bright ribbon. By late morning, the villagers poured back into the market. The tale of the chipped lamp that stayed lit all night spread faster than the wind. Some clicked their tongues. That was luck. Some pressed their palms. That was virtue. Some smacked their lips. That was technique. Ananda only smiled. That was all of us learning together. And that was when the seed of trial began to sprout. The village council decided to hold a largest lamp contest for the next full moon with a prize of 10 bushels of rice. Whoever's lamp was the most dazzling, tallest, brightest would be honored. The young men were thrilled. The wealthy rolled up their sleeves, and the little huts fell silent. Nanda glanced toward Jivika's hut and whispered, "Grandma, will your little lamp compete?" She gently shook her head. "Lamps compete with darkness, child, not with other lamps." The words fell like a pebble into a pond. The ripples spread, touching the shore of a coming climax. After the tale of old Jivika's chipped lamp, staying lit through the night, Vanasiri was no longer the same. Some were moved, taking it as a sign of blessing. Others muttered that it was mere coincidence. But what drew everyone's attention was the council's decision on the next full moon. They would hold the largest lamp contest the village had ever seen. The reasoning sounded reasonable enough. The brighter the lamps, the greater the village's merit. The more radiant, the more sincere our offering to the Buddhas. The youths were excited, the rich eager to show off, while the poor huts, the small lamps, could only sigh. Panting, Nanda ran to tell Jivika, "Grandma, the village is holding a lamp contest. They say whoever has the brightest lamp will get 10 bushels of rice and have their name carved on the temple stele. Will you join?" The old woman was splitting jute fibers, hands trembling, yet steady. She looked up and smiled gently. Nanda lamps compete with darkness, not with other lamps. But if you win, you'll have rice for a whole month. No more worrying about going hungry. Jivika set down the fibers and smoothed the boy's hair. "Child, a month's rice gets eaten up, but a comparing heart lives on. If we light a lamp to outshine others, what does that light reveal, besides our own shadow?" Nanda fell silent, but in his heart, a seed of doubt began to stir. In the days that followed, Vanasiri buzzed like a long market fair. The wealthy bought bronze and silver lamps, hired potters to make lamps nearly as tall as a child. Some boasted of wicks braided from thick flax. Others bragged of pure sesame oil, promising flames that would blaze across the temple eaves. Talk crackled through the lanes. "Lyra's lamp has a glass cover. No wind can blow it out." Somaka's family mixed in beeswax. "It'll burn forever. This time old Jivika surely won't dare bring that chipped flask." Each remark was a needle, but the old woman stayed silent. Day after day, she only hunched over her mats, saving handfuls of rice, saving each drop of oil. Nanda, angry on her behalf, asked, "Aren't you mad that everyone looks down on your lamp?" Jivika shook her head. "What would anger do? A lamp trembles more when the hand holding it trembles. I only need to keep my hand steady. But they say you're poor. You're lowly. Heavy words are like stones. Keep clutching them and your arms ache. Put them down and the road gets lighter." Nanda was stunned into quiet. As the full moon drew near, the temple yard rang with hammers and saws and bragging voices. The lamps grew taller by the day, their mouths wider and wider. People fought over placement, arguing loudly. One evening, when everyone tested the lamps at the temple, the scene blazed like a festival. Bronze lamps roared with big flames, smoke billowing. Silver lamps shone dazzling, reflecting off the roof tiles. Villagers oohed, clapped, and laughed noisily. Lyra, in a blazing saffron blouse, directed, "Look, my lamp is brighter than the moon." What little lamp can compare? All eyes turned to Jivika, quietly setting her chipped flask at the corner of the porch. Her flame was small, humble, swallowed by the sea of light. Someone snorted, "A lamp like that only lights one step. Forget the main hall." The laughter rustled like wind scraping dry leaves. Nanda flushed and moved to argue, but Jivika gently squeezed his hand. "Child, let the wind carry the loud words away. A small lamp doesn't need to shout to shine." The night before the contest, villagers gathered again to assign lamp spots. Quarreling erupted. Some demanded the spot closest to the Buddha statue. Others fought for the main eaves. Everyone wanted center stage. Somaka shouted, "My family's lamp is the biggest. Of course it goes in front." Lyra clapped, "Mine is the brightest. Everyone entering must see it first." The shouting echoed, drowning out Ananda's counsel. "Every lamp casts out darkness. Please don't turn light into a shadow of contention." In the chaos, A young man's shove smashed a poor family's clay lamp. The young mother burst into tears. Her child clung to her leg in fear. No one noticed, except Jivika. She stepped over, gathered the shards, and set them in the mother's hands. If the lamp is broken light, your heart. Light doesn't come only from clay. The mother looked up, eyes red, then slowly calmed. That night, back in the hut, Nanda asked Grandma, "Why don't you argue? If you keep quiet, they'll push your lamp all the way to the gate." Jivika stroked the boy's head. "Nanda, have you seen a spring? It doesn't fight for space yet. The water still finds its path. True light doesn't need to jostle. It only needs to endure. But if they push your lamp outside and no one sees it, if the light is enough, it will find people's eyes. If no one sees, the Buddha sees. Light isn't born to be shown off. It's born to chase away the dark." Nanda sat silent, a mix of anger and tenderness in his chest. On the final night before the full moon festival, strong winds rose. Dark clouds gathered as if warning of a storm. People worried but kept preparing. Lamps were reinforced and filled to the brim with oil. Listening to the wind whistle through the hut's cracks, Jivika whispered, "Wind, don't thrash too hard. People still love to show off they haven't learned yet." Nanda trembled. "Are you afraid the wind will snuff the lamps?" "No, I fear the wind will snuff hearts. A lamp can be relit. Once a heart goes dark, it's hard to brighten again." Outside the fields were ink black, save for the tiny glow from the old woman's hut. And the boys, the glow of the chipped oil flask, flickering yet steadfast. That month's full moon rose very early. Silver light covered Vanasiri, revealing each furrow and weed along the road. The Bodhi temple courtyard was jammed with people. Laughter, hammering, and shouts about lamp placements echoed like a market fair. At the center of the courtyard, large bronze, silver, and ceramic lamps were set in neat rows. Oil was poured to the brim, brand new wicks flames bursting brilliantly. The golden flames rose like pillars, dazzling the temple eaves. Everyone marveled, "Our village has never been this bright. Lyra's lamp really does blaze like the sun. Somaka's lamp burns so strong, it looks like a magic torch." Amid the exclamations, old Jivika quietly stepped in, carrying her chipped oil flask. She didn't push, didn't rush. She walked to the temple porch where a small spot had been left empty because people said it's dark there. Any lamp put there will look dim. The boy Nanda ran after her, looked around, then whispered, "Grandma, they're deliberately putting you in the worst spot." Old Jivika sat down, pulled out a small wick and lit the flame. It caught slowly, burned small, didn't flare up, only cast a modest circle of light around the mouth of the flask. She looked at Nanda and smiled. "Child, the dark is where a lamp is needed. Bright places don't need more light." When all the lamps had been lit, the temple courtyard was more radiant than day. Gold light blazed, silver light glittered, illuminating the roof tiles and the Buddha statue. Villagers oohed and awed, marveling as if that light itself were a blessing. Lyra, in a saffron-colored outfit, stood before her towering silver lamp, smiling with pride. "Look, everyone. This lamp will burn till dawn, lighting all of Vanasiri. No one can match it." Somaka thumped his chest. "My lamp is the tallest, the flame the strongest. No matter how the wind blows, it won't go out. This is a lamp for those with strength." People cheered and praised. Amid that sea of light, old Jivika's little lamp was like a grain of sand in a desert submerged unnoticed. Someone even sneered, "That lamp's as tiny as a gnat's eye, might as well not set it out." Nanda was choked with anger, but Jivika set a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "A lamp doesn't need to argue. Light will speak for itself." At midnight, the sky suddenly changed color. The bright moon faded, and thick black clouds gathered in masses. Wind hissed through the bamboo leaves, rustling like angry whispers. A fierce gust whipped across the temple courtyard. Somaka's bronze lamp flared violently, then leaned. Oil spilled out. The flame lashed and belched black smoke over one corner. People panicked and shouted, rushing to smother the fire. Lyra's silver lamp swung wildly. The once brilliant flame now sputtered smoke oil spraying. Lyra frantically shielded it, but with a single more gust, the lamp went out, leaving a sooty streak on the temple vault. The other large lamps also wavered their flames, surging strong then weak. People ran and shouted. Chaos spread. In the middle of the turmoil, Jivika's small lamp stood steady. A small, neat flame, a right-sized wick, just enough oil. The wind swept by the flame, bowed low, but did not die, then lifted its head again, shining evenly. Nanda's eyes went wide. He shouted, "Grandma, your lamp is still lit. Your chipped lamp is still lit." His shout rose above the wind and made people turn to look. A trembling elder stepped forward and gazed at the small lamp eyes brimming. "This flame, it's what kept us from darkness in the chaos." Another person nodded. Big lamps blaze too fiercely, so when the wind rises, they go out easily. A small lamp that burns just right endures. Villagers gathered around in silence. No one mocked anymore. They looked at that small light as if it were something wondrous, though in truth, very simple. Old Jivika spoke softly, her voice clear in the wind. "A lamp does not seek praise, nor fear, blame. It just does its job staying lit in the dark." Those words fell into people's hearts like raindrops onto parched earth. In the crowd, Lyra lowered her head. Her face burned, whether from the wind or shame she didn't know. She remembered her own mockery. Put a chipped lamp anywhere, and it'll still go out. Yet now that very lamp lit the courtyard, while hers had gone dark. She stepped forward and said, trembling, "Jivika, I was wrong. I mocked your lamp. Please forgive me." The villagers waited in silence to see how she would respond. Jivika only smiled gently and answered, "Harsh words are like stones. Hold them, and your hands get heavy. Let them go, and your steps grow light. I let go long ago." With that, she gently tilted the flask and added a little oil to the wick. The flame brightened like a smile spreading across the listener's eyes. When the storm passed and the clouds scattered, the full moon reappeared. Only a few faint points of light remained in the courtyard. Jivika's lamp was among the few still standing, shining peacefully before the Buddha. Venerable Ananda stepped out, his deep, warm voice carrying across the courtyard. "You've seen it. True light isn't about height, size, or dazzle. It's about endurance. Compassion is the same. It doesn't need display only to keep hearts from going dark. Forgiveness, too, it doesn't need praise only to make the heart lighter." The villagers bowed their heads. They understood that it's in the storm and wind that truth shows itself. And that truth lay in the small, chipped, steadfast lamp that did not show off. As the night faded, Nanda sat by Jivika, eyes shining. "Grandma, I understand now. Lamps don't compete with lamps. They only compete with the dark. I'll remember from now on." The old woman patted his head. "Yes, child. Each person has a lamp in their heart. Don't let life's winds snuff it out, and don't blow it so hard it burns itself out. Keep it just enough, and it will shine long. Under the full moon, two figures, one old, one young, sat side by side, the small light of the oil flask illuminating their peaceful faces. After the full moon storm, the sun rose bright as if to dry every waterlogged trace. Vanasiri's fields were wet with rain, but glittered. The brook chattered like it was singing a new song. People flocked to the temple eyes, still red from a chaotic night. The courtyard was littered with broken lamp frames, half-burned wicks, and oil smeared across the bricks. Amid that mess, only a few small lamps were still lit. Most prominent of all was Jivika's chipped flask, still casting its modest light before the Buddha. The children squealed when they saw it. Jivika's lamp is still burning. The chipped lamp won. The adults didn't clap, but they fell silent for a long time. In that silence were respect and shame. That afternoon, the village council called a gathering. The village head, Sadayu, silver-bearded, deep-eyed, sat in the center with Venerable Ananda beside him. Sadayu began last night. The storm toppled the largest, brightest lamps, but Jivika's chipped lamp endured. What do you think? Somaka bowed his head. I thumped my chest, saying my lamp was strongest. But it went out first. I am ashamed. Lyra swallowed back tears. I mocked Jivika. I wanted my lamp to be the most radiant so I'd be praised, but a single gust snuffed it out. I asked her forgiveness. All eyes turned to Jivika. She still sat hunched, hands interlaced. Slowly she said, I don't resent anyone. Harsh words are heavy if kept in the heart, light if set down. I've already set them down. Last night's wind carried the rest away. Her words fell, and the air grew lighter. Venerable Ananda stood, his voice even and clear. Last night the storm taught in our place. Big lamps aren't necessarily lasting. Dazzling lamps aren't necessarily long bright. A small lamp that is just enough that knows how to keep itself outlasts the night. So it is with compassion. A gentle person isn't weak, soft yet unbroken, that's strength. So it is with forgiveness. It isn't erasing the past, but putting it in the right place so the heart grows light. Old Jivika's little lamp is a mirror for the whole village. Ripples of agreement spread. People bowed their heads in acknowledgement. After the meeting, Vanasiri began to change. People stopped competing to show off big lamps and learned how to keep a steady flame. In Somaka's home, where they used to flood the lamps with oil, they now learned to pour just enough and trim the wick neatly. He told his son, it's not the height of the flame that matters, but how long it holds its breath. Lyra often went to Jivika's hut to learn how to spin small wicks. Her old pride was gone. Her voice had softened. One day she said, I used to think I had to shine brighter than others. Now I only hope to be bright enough for my child to learn from. Thank you. Jivika only smiled. Every lamp has its place. What matters is lighting the right darkness. The village children cheered for a new game. Each home would have a humble lamp. They competed to light small lamps and keep them burning longer. Nanda ran to tell Jivika grandma, we're competing with small lamps now, not big ones. She patted his head, smiling gently. That's how it should be. Small lamps keep small hearts from going dark. Our whole village will shine longer. One afternoon, Lyra came to Jivika's hut with a brand new oil flask, gold-rimmed, gleaming. She set it down and said, I want to give this to make up for mocking you. This flask is much finer than the chipped one. Jivika looked at the flask, then at Lyra. You have a kind heart, I accept. But remember, it's not a pretty flask that keeps the flame. It's a person's heart. Lyra's eyes brimmed as she nodded. In that moment, forgiveness ceased to be words and became action. One person dared to admit fault. The other truly let go. From then on, Jivika's chipped lamp was kept in the main hall. Every full moon, villagers took turns adding oil so it would burn continuously. People called it the humble lamp. Travelers to the temple were told the story, a small, seemingly insignificant lamp that outlasted the storm when the big lamps all went out. It became a symbol. Compassion doesn't show off. Forgiveness doesn't demand a price. One day, Nanda ran home scowling. Someone teased me for being poor. I'm so mad I want to hit him. Jivika pulled him down to sit. Do you remember the small lamp? It didn't need a loud voice and still shone. You can be the same. Forgive not because he's right, but because you don't want your heart to go dark. Put the stone down only then are your hands free to hold your lamp. Nanda lowered his head with a sigh. I get it. Forgiving is to lighten my heart, not to let the other person win. The old woman smiled, seeing a steady light glint in the boy's eyes. The stormy night had long passed, but the story of the chipped lamp lived on in Vanasiri hearts. Each morning someone would stop in the temple, pause before the lamp and bow slightly. They no longer saw it as a shabby object, but as a mirror for the heart. One dawn, with dew still clinging to the Bodhi leaves, the villagers gathered again. They wanted to hear Venerable Ananda once more, to bring closure to what they had lived through. Jivika was there too, her chipped flask set neatly by her side. Ananda sat and spoke, voice deep and slow. We've seen blazing lamps, but when the storm came, they went out faster than a blink. We also saw a small, unnoticed lamp that quietly lit the whole night. That story isn't only about lamps, it's about us. The villagers listened intently. Ananda continued. Some think strength lies in being big and showy, but true strength lies in humility and endurance. Jivika's lamp was small, but it lasted because it didn't crave to flare. It knew how to keep itself just enough to shine. In life, if we keep trying to outdo others, we're like a flame that burns too hot. Eventually, we burn ourselves out. But if we only hope to light a step ahead, we'll go farther. Somaka bowed and murmured, It's true. I wanted my lamp to burn highest, so everyone would praise it. That very craving made it die early. I've learned living just enough lasts longer. Lyra wiped her tears. I mocked Jivika, but when my lamp went out, her chipped lamp lit my way home. I'm ashamed and grateful. From now on, I light not to show off, but to remember. Everyone nodded in unison. Jivika sat quietly, then said slowly, I don't resent anyone. Harsh words are like stones. If I keep holding them, my hands will ache. If I put them down, I can travel far. Forgiveness isn't because the other deserves it. It's because my heart needs to be light. The courtyard fell utterly silent. Those words were not lofty doctrine, but they struck to the bone. People understood that forgiveness doesn't make you lose it, freeze you. A young mother's eyes brimmed. Maybe I need to set it down too. For years I've been angry at my husband for leaving and not returning. But anger only exhausts me. It won't bring him back. I want to let go. Ananda smiled. Yes, forgiveness doesn't erase memory. It puts it in its right place. The memory remains, but it no longer tears at our hearts. Jivika's lamp kept burning small, but serene. A young man asked, Master, then is lighting big lamps wrong? Ananda answered, No, big lamps aren't wrong. What's wrong is lighting them to show off, to outshine. Compassion doesn't perform. Any lamp, big or small, if lit from a bright heart, is precious. If lit to prove something, that flame only feeds the darkness inside. Listeners nodded, their doubts eased. Headman Sadayu rose, voice firm. From now on, our village will end the largest lamp contest. Instead, each household will light one small lamp at its door, so the whole village shines together. No one above anyone, only light joining light. The villagers agreed as one. Applause rolled like waves. Children shouted, "Our whole village will be a sea of light." Jivika looked up at the sky, her aged eyes glinting with a gentle spark. She whispered, "That is true blessing." That evening, Nanda sat beside her and asked Grandma, "I'll tell the story of the chipped lamp to my children and grandchildren someday. What do you most want me to remind them of?" She set a hand over her chest. "Tell them this. Lamps compete with darkness, not with other lamps. Forgive so the heart is light. Be compassionate so the heart is bright. The lamp on the porch will go out one day, but the lamp in the heart, if you keep it, will shine forever." Nanda nodded, eyes shining. In his heart, the seed had sprouted. The next year, on another full moon night, Jivika sat beside her chipped lamp, smiled gently, and breathed her last. The villagers found that she had passed peacefully, her face serene as if asleep. The lamp still burned beside her, quiet as a friend. They held a memorial. They kept that lamp in the main hall, calling it the Lamp of Forgiveness. Every full moon, they took turns adding oil, never letting the flame die. The children grew up with the story, learning that true light is not in blazing display, but in steadiness and sharing. Venerable Ananda ended the memorial in a hush, like a held breath. A light breeze stirred the Bodhi leaves, their whispering seeming to accompany his words. His voice was deep and clear, ringing unmistakably in every heart. Jivika has taught us that compassion is not weakness or powerless modesty. It is solid strength, the strength that keeps fear from ruling our lives. A loving heart doesn't tremble before storms, nor is it crushed by darkness. Like that chipped lamp, small, seemingly frail, yet the only light that endured through the long night. Forgiveness is the same. It doesn't mean wiping away memory or denying painful things that happened. It means putting the past in its proper place so we can breathe lightly and move on. When we can set down the heavy stone in our hands are free to lift a lamp, to sustain a heartbeat. He paused, eyes sweeping the assembly, then continued slowly. In each of us there is a chipped lamp, fragile, small, seemingly insignificant. It might be a thin strand of faith, a bit of patience that remains, or a seed of kindness, not yet sprouted. But if we tend it, fueling it with the oil of compassion and the wick of perseverance, then that very small lamp will be enough to light our way through the longest nights of our lives. When his words ended, everyone still sat in silence. Then the temple bell rang, clear, long, and deep, like an invisible cord, tying the teaching to the bottom of each heart. Some eyes filled with tears, some faces smiled, and all felt that inside them a small lamp had just been lit. Closing the 4 Zen stories. As we close the 4 Zen stories, we see that these seemingly simple tales carry a guiding light for the soul. The story of the monk and the hungry tiger teaches that compassion is not weakness, but the strength that dissolves fear and transforms violent instincts. The story of the mother and the last bowl of rice reminds us There are times we are hungry in the belly, but also hungry in the heart. A shared bowl of rice feeds not only the body, but also faith and love. The story of the Buddha saving the sparrow shows that if we learn to live together and open our hearts even to small beings, peace will return to us. And the story of the old woman and the chipped oil flask proves that true light doesn't need to dazzle for show. It only needs to endure, to dispel the darkness within. Together, the four stories form a complete circle of the Dharma: compassion, forgiveness, sharing, and humility. These aren't distant virtues. They're a path close to our daily lives. When we practice releasing anger, sharing even a little, and keeping our hearts bright in the storm, at that very moment, we are walking the path of awakening the Buddha taught. Americans often say, "No pain, no gain." But these four stories add a deeper layer, not just enduring pain, but transforming it with compassion, with forgiveness, with open hands and a humble heart. That is true growth in the light of the Dharma. If these stories have touched your heart, if they've lit a small lamp to guide you through long nights, I invite you to journey with the channel, Buddhism Seeds. Please subscribe, click like, share with your loved ones, and leave a comment below about what you felt. Your sharing will become seeds of compassion sown in others' hearts. And who knows, from one small lamp, today, tomorrow, we may have a whole sky of light.